across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Good afternoon, this is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. We have some breaking news, and that is that the pro-Palestinian doctor at the centre of many controversial online posts has been arrested. That is Dr. Rameh Aldawan. She has been arrested. We'll bring you the latest on that. The Met Police have arrested her on saying because about allegations that she had made comments at a protest and online in recent months were grossly offensive and anti-Semitic in nature. We will get into that story. We'll also get into the story from earlier. Robert Jenrick saying the burqa should be banned. What do you think? The rape gangs inquiry as well. A third victim has quit. A potential chair has pulled out. What is going on? Why is this disintegrating before the government's eyes? Also, Sadiq Khan accused of a grooming gang cover-up. New evidence revealed on that. There are so many stories around today. Thousands of criminals could be released early under government sentencing. We'll talk to Matt Vickers in a second about that, the Shadow Home Office Minister. We'll talk about Prince Andrew as well, and his brother King Charles and Pope Leo are to pray together in a historic first tomorrow. We'll talk about children paying a huge price during COVID to protect others in society after Boris Johnson has given evidence to the COVID inquiry. Graham Linehan as well, not facing any further action. Non-crime hate incidents will no longer be investigated by the Metropolitan Police. Loads to discuss today. I want your views on all of it. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV, follow me at Peter Cardwell. You can send me a WhatsApp text message, a WhatsApp voice message, less than a minute please, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Plenty to discuss between now and 7 o'clock. As always, I want to hear from you. 0344 499 1000. Let's get started here on Talk Drive. Well, let's go straight to the breaking news in the last half an hour. So that's a doctor who has become notorious for her diatribes about Jewish supremacy in the UK. She has been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. Tomorrow, another hearing into her conduct due to be heard at a medical tribunal. This is Dr. Rameh Aldawan, who has previously described herself as a British Palestinian doctor, was arrested this morning. Earlier, a video circulated of Dr. Aldawan being arrested. Let's have a look at this now.
Arrest for four offences: malicious communication times 3 and for inciting racial hatred. On the 21st of July, he gave a speech which amounts to calls for the eradication of Israel and implied support for all those involved in armed resistance against Israel.
Israel? For Israel, the entity of Israel, the state. Israel, another place?
Sorry.
I thought it's for the UK.
We're Palestinians.
We're not going to talk about
and we've had
now.
our family members and friends murdered. Are you doing this for Israel?
We're not
To MP West treating comments that could be interpreted as anti-Semitic, including anti-Semitic tropes which could be considered grossly offensive in character. On the 7th of October, you posted a variety of communications which demonstrated support for Hamas attack on Israel.
Well, the audio is not great on that, certainly, but we know that she has been arrested. In fact, the Metropolitan Police have given us a statement saying on the morning of Tuesday, the 21st of October, that's this morning, officers arrested a 31-year-old woman at an address in South Gloucestershire. The woman was arrested on suspicion of misusing a public communications network, sending malicious communications and stirring up racial hatred. The arrest relates to an ongoing investigation led by the Metropolitan Police's Public Order Crime Team into allegations that comments were made at a protest and online in recent months were grossly offensive and anti-Semitic in nature. She remains in custody. Just to remind ourselves about what Dr. Rameh Aldawan, Dr. Rameh Aldawan has said on previous occasions. She said, I don't condemn Hamas, I don't condemn the 7th of October, I don't condemn armed resistance to occupation, I condemn Israel, she put in inverted commas. Also, she said 7th of October, the day Israel was humiliated, that's what she wrote on the 7th of October this year, 2 years after that horrendous attack carried out by Hamas terrorists. 7th of October, the day Israel was humiliated, their supremacy shattered at the hands of the children they forced out of their homes, the children who watched foreign Jews execute their loved ones, rape their land and live on their stolen soil. So Dr. Rameh Al-Adwan is now in custody. Let's just take a look at some of the stuff that she's put online herself voluntarily, some of the videos. We'll just have a little quick look at what she has put online previously.
Overall picture is that this is the battle for liberation. The neighbouring Arab countries let Gaza and the resistance down by not joining them after October the 7th. The world has let Gaza and the resistance down by not only failing to stop this immoral, depraved, psychopathic occupier by means of military intervention or sanctions, but by continuing to supply it with weapons, political cover, and extremely biased media coverage.
Yeah, that's enough. That's enough from her, I think. But Dr. Rameh Al-Adwan is in custody at the moment. The Metropolitan Police have arrested her. There are a number of other stories around today which we'll get to in a second, but that's the one I want to ask first to Matt Vickers, who is the Shadow Home Office Minister. He's also Conservative MP for Stockton West. Obviously, she has been arrested, and we know that there are active criminal proceedings. Obviously, we don't know if she has been charged yet. We haven't been told. I expect we will if she is. So we'll be a little bit careful. But I can nonetheless ask you, Matt, do you think it's a good thing that she's been arrested?
I think anybody should be held to account for this. I mean, what we're seeing now in this country is a vile rise in anti-Semitism. We've talked about it earlier with football and sport and Jewish people having the right to go to a football match taken away from them. And we're now seeing in our own NHS this issue, these question marks. But, you know, the people in our NHS are the people who we need to be able to trust. They're some of the best amongst us who serve, and we should be able to trust them. We should be able to trust that anybody who turns up at the NHS gets the same treatment. But actually what we're seeing is terrifying, actually, that our tolerance, the fact that there's a tolerant state, a tolerant culture that allows people to go about their lives in whatever which way, those tolerances are being turned against us now, and people are being, you know, discriminated against, being caused to fear, for threats against them, unable to go to a football match, unable to turn up to their local NHS and ensure that they get the treatment that everybody else around them gets, regardless of who they are.
It was controversial last month when the Medical Practitioner Tribunal Service had said Dr. Al-Adwan should keep her licence to practice medicine, while the General Medical Council continued its investigation into her content. She said the evidence it had seen was not sufficient to establish that there may be a real risk to patients. Do you think people expressing these views are a risk to patients?
I think you know what, we're going to see what the legal process is and whether this person's deemed to have broken the law. But I think when you see some of the language that's being used there, is that somebody who we want to be entrusting to support people of any faith or religion or denomination? I don't think it is. I don't think that you could assume that someone will get the same treatment if they happen to be Jewish from somebody who espouses views like that. So I think there is a concern. I think we're going to see where the police come to with their investigation and then take it from there.
Okay, let's talk about rape gangs, because a third victim has quit. This is the rape gangs inquiry that the government announced a few months ago. Very little seems to have happened since then. There have been very few public pronouncements on that. A third victim who was on an advisory panel has quit. A potential chairwoman has pulled out. What do you make of this?
Well, I think it's a disaster. I think this issue has caught the public psyche. Everybody is devastated about what it means that this has been allowed to go on in towns across this country in the way it has. We want to see justice. We want to see the questions asked. We want to see anybody who's not only those who perpetrated, but those who turned a blind eye and enabled it, held to account. Actually, the government had to be kicked screaming into this inquiry. They voted against, they were cornered into it, and now they agreed to deliver such an inquiry and are failing to do so. There is no timetable, there is no chair, and victims are losing faith rightfully. It's devastating to think that these people who've been through what they've been through are now quitting the panel because they feel they're being let down. You know, they've talked about controlling and condescending language used towards them. They've talked about the fact that it's, you know, political interference and skullduggery. Well, we can't go on like this. We need that proper inquiry. We need a national statutory judge-led inquiry with all the bells and whistles enabled to hold people to account properly. I mean, we even had debate about whether the councils who've had a hand in this, who are being questioned in this place, in this space, should have the right to determine what goes on and have a hand in governing such inquiries. We need the real deal done. It's shambolic, actually, that we're losing victims who are here to get answers.
Let's have a look at what the government's been saying about this. Earlier in the House of Commons, the Home Office Minister, Jess Phillips, gave an update on the rape gangs inquiry.
Government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
When Jess Phillips says that, Matt, what are your thoughts around that? Because she has been a campaigner for a long time, yet when she gets into government, she's someone who seems to be dragging her feet in this.
Well, we've sat through that session. The reality is we did not get a timetable. There is still no chair. There are no answers for these people. And the victims, the people who've been through most atrocious situations, are now walking away from this. They don't think that the government's on their side. They don't think these people are going to be held to account. And that's why they're disengaging in what seems to be quite a shambolic process now. We need that timetable. We need a commitment. We need this thing to be underway. Months and months are passing. These people have been wronged. They are not getting the answers. And the people who they were supposed to be able to... I mean, these people have been let down time and time again. These are people who've been let down by social services, by local authorities, by the police, by the judicial system. They need the answers. We need to right the wrongs so that this can never happen again. Enough is enough. We need a timetable. We need a commitment. The chair needs to be appointed and need to get on with the job.
Another thing you've been talking about today is the sentencing bill the government is putting around. You've been saying that more than 2,000 prisoners serving sentences for rape, stalking and grooming will have their jail time cut because of the government's new sentencing plan. The Conservatives in government added only 500 prison places net in the whole time they were in government. How can you now blame Labour for the fact that prisons are full?
I think we should have been building more prison places, but I also think that the last government was right to toughen up sentences for the worst crimes. We did that. We locked people up for longer. It's what the public wanted.
Isn't that part of the problem, Matt? When you lock people up for longer, you lock people up for longer, and then the pressure on the system was greater, and there were fewer places, and you didn't build enough prison places, and now you're blaming Labour for that.
Give me 2 minutes. So I think of course there was pressure on the prison system. That's why, I think we were right to make the decision to lock people up for longer for committing some of those worst crimes. I think we were right to keep people in prison during COVID when there was a debate about that. I think we were right to embark on the biggest prison building programme since the Victorian era. We were building prisons. We were putting funding aside. There was stuff going through planning. The things were getting built. And actually, what have we seen in April this year? We've seen the government, who's telling us about this pressure, reducing the budget. They cut the budget on that prison building by £700 million. And now what do they think the answer is? To let more people out early. Some of the most vile criminals who should not be walking the streets. They've already let 26,000 people out of prison early. They said they were going to tag them all. They failed to tag them. They even failed to get the right people released. They let some of the wrong prisoners out. One of those prisoners went on to commit a sexual assault on someone in Kent within hours of being released. We can't go on like this. And tonight, in the House of Commons, Labour are putting through a bill that is going to do more of the same. It's going to let rapists out earlier. It's going to let paedophiles out earlier. This should be the #1 story on every channel, and it should be the front page of every newspaper tomorrow, because it has awful consequences for the public. It has awful consequences for the police who are going to be trying to contain this problem. We are letting some of the most vile individuals out early without justice, without consequences. And what sort of signal does that send to them and to anybody else who might be of that ilk?
That was only 1 minute and 27 seconds. But how can the government actually face this crisis? How can they deal with this crisis? You can say, well, we had plans to build lots of prison places. Boris Johnson, I was there in the Ministry of Justice in 2020 when Boris Johnson said he was going to build 20,000 prison places. That's fine, but net, you only added 500. So what alternative did Labour have? They inherited this mess, did they not? They can't.
There are two things.
You could have built a lot more prison places in 14 years. They can't build as many prison places as they needed, even if they did everything possible within just over a year that they've been in government. They inherited this crisis from you. You're at 99% capacity when Rishi Sunak was Prime Minister.
The end of the day, the last government embarked on the biggest prison building programme since the Victorian era. There was money there.
Why didn't they do it earlier?
Built, there was planning permission being put through. Prison places were being created and would have carried on being created. And what's happened now?
Net 500 in 14 years.
700 million from the prison building budget, but more than that, 12% of all people in our prisons are foreign national offenders. 10,000 people. Those people need deporting. They need sending back. We've put amendments down in that place that would do that, would disapply the Human Rights Act. We said you should leave the ECHR. But by disapplying the Human Rights Act, we could get those people sent home. If you come to this country, if you abuse our hospitality, if you commit crimes, you should not be allowed to stay. It is a privilege to come to this country, and those people don't deserve it. They should be deported now, and you can reduce the prison population overnight by 10,000 spaces. It's got to be done. They've got to get on with it.
Matt, thank you. That's Matt Vickers there, who's the Shadow Home Office Minister for the Conservatives. Thanks to everyone who's been in touch. Sean in Bridlington says if someone posted similar things as Dr. Aladwan about Muslims, they would have a jail sentence that would make Lucy Connolly's look like a trip to the local shop. We will see what happens to Dr. Aladwan. Regarding the doctor, about time people like this are being arrested for inciting hatred. Time to start arresting the imams too who are spreading hate too, says Stephen in Manchester. Damon in Wigan says, I'm glad this doctor has been arrested over what she said online, and I hope she feels the full force of the law. However, Peter, I fear this doctor will not be the only one with these views, and the NHS should be doing more to check staff all over the NHS. Thanks, Peter. Well, thank you. One more from Elisa in Chelmsford. She has been in touch to say, I'm very relieved to hear of that doctor's arrest. There's no way I would want her treating me or my family or anyone else for that matter. I was one of many who wrote a letter of complaint against her. Now we wait, says Elisa. Lots to respond to this. We have the campaigner against anti-Semitism, Nicole Lambert, who will be here in a second. Also, interestingly, there's been a podcast that Louis Theroux has done with the singer, I use the term loosely, from Bob Vylan, Pascal Robinson Foster, who says that BBC staff praised him when he left the stage at Glastonbury. That was after he said death, death to the IDF. We've asked Avon and Somerset Police, who are allegedly investigating this, for a statement. They haven't given us one. Previously they said they're still investigating it. Are they just running down the clock on this? I think we can draw our own conclusions on that, because after a amount of time elapses in an investigation, they will just drop it. I think that's what they want to do. They want this to go away. It's as clear as day what happened, and they haven't done the job they should have done, in my opinion. Lots to discuss with Nicole. Let's get your voice on the air as well. 0344 499 1000. Stay with us.
mean, what we learn from history is you don't learn from history, Julia. We need to make sure we get the inquiry done quickly. I mean, it's 3 years, this inquiry, hundreds of millions of pounds. It's ludicrous. This isn't actually about, I mean, nobody set out to do anything criminal. Nobody set out to do the wrong thing. People tried to make good decisions based on flying blind. It was very difficult at the time, but it's very important we learn the lessons and we don't repeat those mistakes in the future, some of which you've been talking about children not being able to go to school, about people not being able to spend time outside. There's lots of those things were clearly pointless.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll get to more of your messages in a minute, but in the meantime, I want to speak to Nicole Lambert, who is a journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. Nicole, good afternoon.
Hi, Peter. Nice to see you.
Nice to see you too. The news, the story that's just broken in the last little while about the doctor being arrested. This is Dr. Rami Aladwan, who has had some horrendous comments. She has finally been arrested. No charges yet for what we know. Nicole, your reaction?
I'm happy. I'm happy that what I see as the danger of her, and obviously we have to be careful because proceedings are active now, but that is being looked at seriously. A few weeks ago, she was in front of a panel in terms of whether she should be allowed to practice as a doctor or not. And the panel said that yes, she should still be allowed to practice as a doctor, and that no one would seriously take her as a threat. So I'm glad that someone is taking her as a threat. The suspension panel is the GMC did push against that, so she is in front of them again in the next few weeks. So
it's tomorrow actually. It'll be very interesting to see how that happens. Some of her previous comments: I don't condemn Hamas, I don't condemn the 7th of October, I don't condemn armed resistance to occupation, I condemn Israel in inverted commas. 7th of October, the day Israel was humiliated, their supremacy shattered at the hands of the children they forced out of their homes, the children who watched foreign Jews execute their loved ones, rape their land and live on their stolen soil. The police will be looking at all those comments now, and as you say, that hearing will happen tomorrow in regard to the Medical Practitioner Tribunal's service, which has argued that she should keep her licence to practice while the General Medical Council continues its investigation into her conduct. We've already heard from viewers and listeners who would be very unhappy to be treated by this doctor. Certainly this has come and there has been an arrest, but as we know, the Metropolitan Police has been criticised on many occasions, including by both of us, Nicole, for not arresting enough people who are blatantly anti-Semitic and inciting racial hatred.
Well, exactly. So obviously we've seen the Met Police this week just discuss that it's not going to be investing non-hate crime incidents on social media, but it's important that we do distinguish that there are hate crime incidents, and racism, this kind of racism and her obsession with the idea of Jewish supremacy, that to me would fall under a race crime and incitement to hatred, which she hasn't been arrested for. So we will see. I hope that she has been arrested for the right things, and I think there is probably a huge dossier on her, and it's not just although she's been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. She was in Leeds and she said some horrendous things there.
Yeah,
so the police forces will join up.
A spokesman for the Metropolitan Police said on the morning of, this morning, officers arrested a 31-year-old woman at an address in South Gloucestershire. The woman was arrested on suspicion of misusing a public communications network, sending malicious communications and stirring up racial hatred. The arrests relate to an ongoing investigation led by the Met's Public Order Crime Team into allegations comments made at a protest online in recent months were grossly offensive and anti-Semitic in nature. She remains in custody. We'll see what happens there. Speaking of people who are in custody or people who should be in custody, Pascal Robinson Foster, who is the lead singer, I use the word loosely, of the Bob Vylan group, has been saying on a podcast with Louis Theroux that he believes that, he has said that BBC staff apparently praised him when he left the stage at Glastonbury. This is after he shouted death, death to the IDF and talked about from the river to the sea, which is of course anti-Semitic, even if Sadiq Khan doesn't think it is. It is. Let's have a look at what he's been saying to Louis Theroux.
Stand by the chant, and would you chant that on stage now?
Oh yeah, like what if I was to go on Glastonbury again tomorrow? Yeah, I would do it again. I'm not regretful of it. I'm not regretful of it. I do it again tomorrow, twice on Sundays. I'm not regretful of it at all. Like, the subsequent backlash that I've faced, it's minimal. It's minimal compared to what people in Palestine are going through. And they're the people that I'm doing it for. They're the people that I'm being vocal for. Then what is there to regret?
What is there to regret? Well, I don't know, inciting racial hatred, saying people should be killed simply because they're serving in an army. Interesting with Louis Theroux, who said that he was duped by Jimmy Savile. Maybe he just can't spot a wrong un when he arrests them. Or when he interviews them, I should say, people who should be arrested by Avon and Somerset Police. Avon and Somerset Police, by the way, we did ask them what on earth is going on with this investigation. It's been months now since Glastonbury. It's been months since he chanted his anti-Semitic slogans. He hasn't been interviewed, as far as we know. He hasn't been arrested, as far as we know. And there he is, brazenly, in a podcast saying he would do the same thing again and twice on Sundays. Nicole, your thoughts?
So I've listened to the entire podcast, and this is one of the disturbing elements of it. But perhaps the more disturbing element is that Louis Theroux appears to agree with him quite a lot during the podcast. There's one moment where he starts talking about, almost to kind of go back to what the doctor was talking about, it's about Jewish supremacy. Then Bob Villan is talking about Jewish white supremacy and how Zionism is the kind of heart of it. And Louis appears to agree and says, I'm just going to quote, "So it's like they're prototyping an aggressive form of ethno-nationalism, which is then rolled out, whether it's by people like Viktor Orban in Hungary or Trump in the US. So it's a certain sense of post-Holocaust Jewish exceptionalism or Zionist exceptionalism has become a role model on the national stage for what these white identitarians would like to do in their own countries." So in kind of normal parlance, as in not kind of rubbish like that, they're basically saying that Israel is a kind of a model state for white supremacists. Which is obviously complete rubbish, and Israel is obviously formed by people who suffered from white supremacy in the name of the Holocaust. So there's quite a few different issues there, and you know, as you say, Bob Villan hasn't been arrested. He's happy to talk about it, even though it should be sub judice. He obviously feels like he's got away with it, just as in Amsterdam 5 weeks ago he told people to go out and start beating up Zionists. So this is someone who appears to have got away with things. There's no reason why, to me, it seems, why the police haven't arrested him. As you say, Glastonbury was many months ago. We all saw it on TV. How difficult is it to make this case?
Yeah, it's a very, very good point. I'm actually going to ask the people behind the scenes, can we contact Avon and Somerset Police again and just say, where is this? Why won't they tell us where this is? What are they hiding? It's really straightforward. This has been months now. He should have been arrested. Alison's been in touch, says, why hasn't he been arrested? Why hasn't Pascal Robinson Foster been arrested? I don't know the answer, Alison, and Avon and Somerset Police will not tell us. Now, I don't want to be a conspiracy theorist about this, but Nicole knows, I know, we're experienced reporters. We know that you can run the clock down on these investigations. You can say, well, we've run out of time from the start of an investigation. We've done 6 months and we can't continue this, and there are, or this is a complex investigation. It's not a complex investigation. A blind man on a galloping horse, he saw it. The moment I saw that online, I knew that was anti-Semitic. I knew he was inciting racial hatred. He lied about the fact that he wasn't talking. He said he was talking about the IDF in general. Then footage emerges from previously where he says he's talking about individual soldiers. The guy should just be arrested and charged. It is really straightforward, Nicole. And as we're seeing time and time and time again, anti-Semitism like that is allowed in our society.
And it's allowed by people like Louis Theroux, who, as I say, not just appears to agree with it, but encourages it. So they have this whole discussion about what does end the IDF mean, what does death to the IDF mean, and Louis kind of invites him to say, are you talking about actually people being killed? And he doesn't really answer.
And he said, and was seen on tape a few weeks prior to that, talking about individual soldiers, the soldiers of the IDF. That's what he said. He's just an anti-Semite.
Yeah, and he's laughing at the law. That's what's happening. And we saw with Kneecap that it was run down, the clock was run down by a day, and it appears that this is what they want to happen too, and it feels like the police aren't looking after us. We had 2 people killed 3 weeks ago in Manchester. This is incitement. And what's happening with it?
Yeah. Nicole, thank you. We will get on to Avon and Somerset Police again. If they get back to us before 7 o'clock, we will tell you. That's Nicole Lampert there, journalist and campaigner against anti-Semitism. As Darren has messaged me on 0344 499 1000, if any of these racist chant speeches were about Muslims or Islam, there would be a totally different response. On the doctor, Margaret in Yorkshire says, I sincerely hope this doctor faces a similar sentence to Lucy Connolly. Appeasement and two-tier justice must stop right now. Imagine if a Jew was to be treated by this doctor with such militant views. I would fear for their safety. Steve in East Yorkshire says, listening to the horrible things said by the pro-Palestinian doctor, Jewish people must be very concerned and worried about seeking treatment. How many more doctors, care home, etc. employees harbour similar views? And can we be sure they would treat people fairly and with impartiality? I am not so sure. And Stuart from Ramsden Bellhouse says, Jess Phillips's tone is one of complete disdain. She doesn't like being forced to read out a statement she doesn't agree with. Disgusting attitude. Lots more to come. Lots of discussion on all of this. We're also going to talk about those rape gangs and the fact that the government's inquiry seems to be falling apart. 3 victims who are saying they want no part of it, and 2 potential chairmen and women pulling out as well. We will get the latest on all of this in just a second, and your views too. Give me a ring, pick up the phone, 0344 499 1000.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who has been in touch. We'll come to some of your messages. Well, let's do some now. Dawn in Chelmsford says we can analyse Bob Villan, and of course Pascal Robinson Foster should be arrested, but at the end of the day he appears just to be an ignorant oaf. Rachel says, although it's commendable that this doctor has been arrested, I wonder how many more people in responsible positions get away with this kind of thing. Hatred of Jewish people needs to be stamped out across the UK. Amen, Rachel. And Ray's been in touch. He says, I'm a retired Avon and Somerset police officer. I wrote to the Police and Crime Commissioner and got a platitudinous reply saying that I should know some inquiries take time. I said I would come back and do it in a week. They're waiting for the 6 months, a la Lord Hermer. Now, Ray, that's not outrageous, and despicable allegation that Lord Hermer would have waited 6 months and 1 day simply to charge the kneecap. A very suggestion that Lord Hermer, who previously represented Gerry Adams, would in any way be biased towards kneecap is something, of course, I cannot endorse in any way. So thanks for that, Ray. Right then, let's talk about the grooming gangs, the rape gangs. Earlier in the House of Commons, Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, speaking about the lack of progress on this inquiry. Let's hear about this.
This scandal arose because young, mainly white girls were systematically gang raped, and this was covered up by those in authority because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. So it's all the more shocking that when calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly, and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
Chris Philp there, the Shadow Home Secretary. Let's speak to Chris Tuck, a child sexual abuse survivor. Chris was on the Victim and Survivor Consultative Panel for the Independent Inquiry into Child Sexual Abuse for 8 years. Chris, that was the one Alexis Jay did, I think, Professor Alexis Jay.
Correct, Peter. Hi.
Hi there. So we know that Alexis Jay, actually she was complaining recently that only 2 of the recommendations that she had put forward were actually being acted upon. When you see the new inquiry, the one that the Labour government reluctantly agreed to, you've got 3 people like yourself, victims of horrendous abuse, who are pulling out of this saying they want no part of it, 2 potential chairmen and women saying they want no part of it. What do you think, Chris?
It is really concerning, but we had this kind of angst and turmoil when we set up the ICSA inquiry. We went through to the 3rd chair before we actually got going, because you need to have the right people in place to get the job done. And I think anyone that's left on the panel or is outside working for the panel needs to make sure that they keep their voices heard and make sure they get the right people involved to actually run that inquiry.
So if they're pulling out of this, if the victims, for example, are pulling out of this, do you think that's the wrong approach?
I don't think it's wrong if that's what they feel they need to do. However, you can really only change things from the inside. I learnt that at my cost. When you're on the outside, you don't have a voice. Mm-hmm. But what they've done by going public with the issues that they faced, they've now brought a lot of media attention to what they feel has gone wrong, and hopefully this will now put it on the right track and the right trajectory. There are some people who say, as someone who's been involved with social work, shouldn't be the chairman or woman of this because of their background, because social workers often covered this stuff up. There are others saying that a policing figure, I know Jim Gamble is someone who we've had on this programme a number of times, who is a child exploitation expert. He's in the frame to be chairman of this. Some people say no, one with a policing background should be there. But if you do need this expertise, who would you like to chair it? Who do you think should be the chairman or woman, Chris? I personally haven't had time to even think about who the chairperson should be, and to be blunt, I don't think it's my place to say. However, we've got to think about the skill set of the person that's going to chair this up. As a survivor, if my abuse was covered up by a certain statutory service, I wouldn't want that being the lead of this inquiry. However, they do have the skill set to lift the rug of the cover-ups that have happened, because they know where to look. So I think we shouldn't throw the baby out with the bathwater, so to speak. I think we should look at the person, look at their credentials, look at what's their ethos, and look at their morals, and go from there, because it needs to be the right person with the right skill set that knows where to look, that knows how to keep people accountable, and all of that needs to really be taken into account when you're appointing somebody.
There is a balance there, isn't there? You know, someone who needs to know where to look, but also someone who's not of the system themselves. Very, very interesting.
They can't be of the system, but they need to know how the system works, because otherwise you can be blindsided by that.
Did you feel you were listened to when you were on that panel for 8 years? Did you feel that your suggestions, your experience was heard by Professor Alexis Jay?
So there were times when we felt, and I can only speak for myself actually, that I felt that we wasn't listened to. However, overall, we were, because they knew where they were going wrong, because we told them exactly where they were going wrong. And when they listened to us, we were able to make sure that we were delivering on what needed to be delivered upon. And I think when you get past, you know, when you form a group, you go through the forming, norming, storming, performing. Yeah, you go through that model, and that is true for any group that comes together. You need to sort of like understand each other, trust each other, and then move forward to get the job done. And everyone has to go through that kind of process. But being a survivor, it's very hard to trust people and systems that have let you down and failed you. And that's all I can say, really. But at the end of the day, Peter, sorry, we got that inquiry, we got a report, and we still haven't implemented any of the recommendations. And it was the 3rd year anniversary yesterday, and I was really quite frustrated and sad that we're still here, because even if we get this inquiry into grooming gangs up and running, just because you get a report at the end of it, it doesn't mean the government's going to implement anything or change anything.
As we've seen, and progress on only 2 of those things. And you would have thought, I would have thought anyway, I don't know what you think, Chris, but I would have thought Jess Phillips coming into government, having been such a campaigner about it in opposition, would be someone who would say, let's get this moving as soon as possible. Clearly you feel let down by, well, I don't know if it's clear or not, let me know your thoughts, but I would imagine not 1 but 2 governments have let you down.
This child protection from sexual abuse and exploitation needs cross-party backing, right? In order to make it happen. So I am deeply frustrated by both governments that we haven't done what we needed to do, and that's changed the culture of how we respond to child sexual abuse and exploitation. Jess Phillips, I had 100%, I'm supportive of her at the beginning, and now I would like to think that she's doing the best job possible, but we can only see and hear what we see and hear in public. We don't know what's going on behind closed doors. And also for me, I know that departments across government are not working together to make sure that any of the recommendations are implemented. I know that they work in silos. So until they come together and work together properly for the benefit of children and young people and us adult survivors in the UK, nothing foundational and substantive is going to change.
Chris, just before you go, can you remind us what happened to you, the kind of thing I know that is still happening to some degree in this country and is being ignored? Can you just tell us your story if you want to, if you're able to?
Yeah, I mean, of course, it's all out there in the public domain. So I was abused within the family home. I grew up in 3 different family settings where there was domestic violence, which I witnessed on a day-to-day basis. I suffered mental, physical, sexual abuse and neglect. I was sexually abused by someone outside of the family home. So I know what it feels like to be a victim and a survivor. I know what it feels like to live with the impact. And I also know how re-traumatising and re-triggering it is to fight the system, to improve itself, to benefit children and young people today. And I find it extremely frustrating that we don't seem to have moved forwards in the way that we need to.
Chris, thank you very much for speaking to me today. That's Chris Tuck there, a child sexual abuse survivor who was on the victim and survivor consultative panel for the independent inquiry. Professor Alexis Jay's big inquiry into child sexual abuse. That was an 8-year contribution that Chris made there. Jason's been in touch from the Lake District. He says Maggie Oliver and Peter Blexley should be leading the inquiry. And on Twitter, Bob in Surrey says Maggie Oliver on the inquiry team, get her on there and she will sort it out. Thank you to Tony as well about Annie Hudson. The proposed rape gangs inquiry chairwoman has quit the process. It is an absolute shambles, says Tony. More on this later on in the programme. Let me know your thoughts on all of it. Is it all just falling apart, and will we ever properly get those answers that we need? Will the lid be lifted? If they can't even appoint a chairman and woman, if people who are victims and survivors are withdrawing from this, what does it say about this inquiry before it even gets started? We'll talk about Prince Andrew in just a moment. He's not paid rent for the Royal Lodge since 2003. Also, his brother King Charles and Pope Leo are to pray together in a historic first, the head of the Church of England and the head of the Catholic Church. That's happening in the Vatican City tomorrow. Daniel Britton, parliamentary and constitutional historian, is going to join me in just a few minutes. We'll get all of your thoughts on the air between now and 7 o'clock. Let me know what they are. 0344 499 1000.
That's exactly what he's loaded up the Oval with gold, and he'll do the same in his ballroom. And I think he'll slap his name on there from day one.
Yeah, American taxpayers are not being asked to dip into their pockets for this. Not even Washington local taxes are paying for this. This is privately funded, right?
It is. He's getting donations at about $25 million a pop from some of the biggest U.S. tech companies. And so, yeah, for them, I mean, to get their names on a plaque somewhere and to build their relations with President Trump and keep them happy, for them, it's a pretty good investment. And, yeah, for the American people, too, yeah, no taxpayer funding.
the UK. On DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
YouGov have just released a poll, the polling company, saying that the British public are firmly behind the idea of stripping the Duke of York of his dukedom. This is Prince Andrew, who said he's not going to use the title anymore, but it would take an act of Parliament to actually strip him of the title of Duke of York. 80% of people think he should be stripped of it, including 63% who strongly support such a measure. Just 6% of people opposed to the idea. Now, Downing Street say this is a matter for Buckingham Palace. Critics dispute this. YouGov says that 55% of British people say that it should be the King who decides whether or not Prince Andrew keeps his remaining titles, with only 26% saying it should be down to Parliament, but it'll have to go through Parliament. We also have some news about Prince Andrew. The Times reporting today that he's not paid rent on the Royal Lodge, the 30-room home that he lives in, and there are thoughts and revelations about that. Let's speak to Daniel Britton, who is a parliamentary and constitutional historian. Daniel, thank you for joining me on the programme today. I just wonder what you make of this poll. We've just received it here of the public very, very clearly clear in their thoughts anyway in this particular poll, saying that the dukedom should be taken off him, because when he says he's not going to use the title, it's still there in theory if he wanted to use it, isn't there?
Absolutely is, Peter, and thank you very much for asking me. Yes, and I can well understand that result of the poll. It's not really in some ways a surprise as the week drags on. But is it doable? Yes. You can take a title away by parliamentary legislation. And actually, in recent years, 22 and 23, two MPs put forward backbench bills to empower the King to take away both ordinary peerages, any peerage, and particularly to strip royal members of the gang of Her Royal Highnesses and princes and princesses powers to take those titles away. It has been discussed it has been brought up in Parliament, hasn't ever been enacted. It will require a government to take an interest in it. But there have actually, when these big stories came out in 22, at a time when the city of York took away Prince Andrew's freedom of the city and his other titles of Earl of Inverness and Baron Killyleagh, a lot of people there petitioned against that he should lose those titles as well. It's been on the back burner. People know the kind of thing that is around and capable of doing this. What it depends on is some move by the King and the government to actually promote a bill in Parliament. And when the government says this is strictly a matter for the royal family, I don't really believe that. The King and the Prime Minister meet every week for a meeting, usually on a Tuesday evening. I would be very surprised if they haven't discussed these sort of matters.
Of course. What do you make as well about this revelation in the Times that Prince Andrew has not paid rent on Royal Lodge for more than 2 decades? There are lots of questions about where his money comes from, how he can afford the life that he has, and the copy of the leasehold agreement on his Grace and Favour Windsor mansion obtained by the Times says he has paid 1 peppercorn if demanded in rent per year since 2003, so really nothing at all, or very little anyway.
Peppercorns don't really cost that much.
No.
People, so you can probably find one somewhere.
Yes.
Look, I don't know the absolute details of the lease arrangement. What I have read, like you, is that the Prince paid £1 million for the formation of the lease, and then a rather more significant sum, £7 million, for the refurbishment of Royal Lodge. So it was a huge sum of money that was paid out. Now, in return for that very substantial refurbishment, there was then a completely different arrangement for the rent. And to some extent, that is understandable. It's worth adding, by the way, that Royal Lodge was the home of a former Duke and Duchess of York, namely George VI, as he went on to become, and the Queen Mother as she later became. But, you know, it would be achievable, but I think it's a simple image of living in a 30-room mansion.
Yes.
That is just so much the wrong thing.
No, absolutely. Tell us as well, I know you're a parliamentary and constitutional historian, how unprecedented is it for the King? He's heading to the Vatican City. He's going to pray with Pope Leo. So you have the head of the Church of England and the head of the Catholic Church praying together tomorrow.
That's right. And of course it's going to be significant. And no doubt the King is hoping that it will receive a lot of attention. He's there tomorrow, he's there Thursday. He said only yesterday he hopes attention will be paid to this. But in the present mood, with Prince Andrew's stories coming out every day, who knows if that will be the case. Significant for a number of reasons. These talks between the Roman Catholic Church and the Church of England, talks and, of course, joint meetings, have gone on for a very long time. Queen Elizabeth first visited the Vatican City in an official capacity in 1961, and she made 2 subsequent state visits in 2018 and 2020. The King visited Pope Francis in April, just a few days before his death, and so for what was actually going to be a state visit, but now he's going to pray with Pope Leo. I seem to remember, because I'm very, very old, Peter, that the then Archbishop of Canterbury, Michael Ramsey, prayed with the then Pope, Paul VI, in 1966, 60 years ago. And the talk then was, when will reunification between the two churches come about? Well, it still hasn't, and maybe now it's rather less likely than it might have been then. But it does show that efforts are being made all the time for dialogue between the two churches, and it is significant to see the Supreme Governor of the Church of England meet the Supreme Pontiff, Pope Leo.
The Supreme Daniel Britton there, parliamentary and constitutional historian, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Thanks to Joanna in Salisbury as well, who's been in touch and says, "Hi Cardi P, I think the Duke title should be passed on to his daughter immediately. Why should they be punished for the sins of their parents? The Duke of York will retain his title of Randy Andy," says Joel. Russ in Norwich says, "Brilliant show as ever. I'm absolutely fuming over this Bob villain character." That's Pascal Robinson Foster. What a scumbag, evil, pure evil, and so thick he hasn't got a clue about the Middle East or the spiritual war that is going on out there, like a lot of ignorant sheep in the West who just follow trends. Sadly, the trend now is hating Jewish people. It's disgusting, but reflects our society. Where will this end? Check the Bible for the answer. This is prophesied. Thanks, Peter. I watch Talk every day, but it's my first time messaging Russ in Norwich there. Well, Russ, thank you for your first message. I hope it is not your last. It was a sensible and interesting one, and please do send through more messages. You can do that too. 0344 499 1000 for messages on WhatsApp. You can send me a WhatsApp voice message on that number as well, or just give me a ring. We'll take some calls in the next hour. 0344 499 1000. We're going to talk after the news to Nigel Evans, the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons, about all these different stories: the rape gangs inquiry, the grooming gangs cover-up by Sadiq Khan, which has been alleged. Lots to discuss. Stay with us.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, a very good evening. It's just gone 5 o'clock. This is Talk Drive. I'm Peter Cardwell. Thank you so much for your company this Tuesday. Loads to talk about, including Boris Johnson, the former Prime Minister, who's been giving evidence to the COVID inquiry. Guess what? Lockdowns made our children worse off. They caused all sorts of problems. He said it probably went too far. Yeah, exactly, Boris. I'm glad you've caught up with the rest of us now, years on. We'll see what he's been saying in a second and ask Nigel Evans about it, the former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. We're all talking about that huge price that children paid with Isabel Oakeshott. We'll also talk about Sadiq Khan, a grooming gang cover-up. He has said that there isn't a grooming gang problem in London. Well, there's plenty of evidence to say there is. He would deny that there's a cover-up, but we'll look into that. We'll also look at the inquiry itself, the big inquiry. Lots of people dropping out of that, survivors, advisors, potential chairmen and women. And also the Metropolitan Police are to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents after the Graham Linehan case. This comes as news that the pro-Palestinian doctor, who's been causing so much consternation and has been saying horrible things about Jewish people, she has been arrested. Loads to talk about. We'll get the sport as well before 6 o'clock with Dean Scoggins, Deputy Head of Sport at The Sun. But most of all, I want your comments, your thoughts on everything that's going on today. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a WhatsApp text message. Send me a WhatsApp voice message. Give me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss between now and 7 o'clock here on Talk Drive. Well, as I mentioned, the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson was giving evidence to the COVID inquiry. Very interesting in this earlier because Gavin Williamson, who was the Education Secretary, a lot of his messages were revealed. He didn't hold back in his criticism of Downing Street making him look like an idiot. He said in regard to schools closing, different ideas around how to evaluate kids and whether what exam results they should get as well. But the big question is about the huge price paid, particularly by children, by many, many people, of course, adults as well, but children as well, to, as he put it, protect others in society as a result of the COVID lockdowns. Let's take a look at what the former Prime Minister Boris Johnson said at the COVID inquiry earlier today.
It was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
I thought it was a nightmare idea. Well, that might be fine. He still did it. Still did it, Boris Johnson. Let's speak to Nigel Evans. He's former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons and was the Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley. Nigel, there's a lot of hindsight in 2020 vision here saying, well, oh yeah, actually, not sending kids to school for a very long time, months on end, may have harmed their development. So many people knew about that at the time. So many people warned about that at the time, including my colleague Julia Hartley-Brewer. What did the government do? Did they listen to her? No. In fact, what they did was they set up a unit to monitor people like her and look at what they were saying and doing in a hostile way. That's all public as well. Is this the government just coming to the conclusion that many of the rest of us came to later on? What's your perspective on this, Nigel?
Yeah, I think that Boris did make a huge mistake. We can't turn the clock back, Peter, but what we can do is learn from the mistakes that we made in the past, because who's to know that we might not be facing something similar in a year or two's time or whenever it happens to be. So let's look at where we made those mistakes. Now, I remember talking to Matt Hancock at the time, who was the Health Secretary, and I said, Matt, who is in danger, who is dying? And it took me several goes with Matt until eventually he sent me through some data. And it quite clearly demonstrated that the people that were most at risk were those in the cohorts of 100 to 90, and then the next cohort. And it went in like an inverted pyramid. And so the ones that were least problematic were clearly the younger ones. And for the life of me, and I did say to Matt at the time, why don't you just protect the elderly and the vulnerable and let everybody else get on with it? And that is clearly what should have happened. It happened in parts of America. It happened in Sweden. and we got it completely wrong. Locking up all these youngsters, basically putting them under house arrest, which is what happened for months on end, was insane. And I believe that this is a ticking time bomb for society to be picking up the pieces in many months and years to come. You know, the mental health issues that we really haven't even begun to scratch the surface of, I think you can directly link back to the closing of the schools. I mean, we closed the schools, we closed the gyms, we closed golf courses. I mean, it was absolutely insane.
Well, I have friends who are teachers who talk about the COVID babies, who talk about the COVID kids, and the people who at key points in their development went through this. And my question is, will lessons be learned, actually? Because I would be very sceptical that if the same thing happened again, God forbid that it ever does, that people would go into another lockdown. I think that's unlikely. And of course, government is by consent. You've got to lead the people, but you've also got to do it with their consent. I just wonder, will lessons be learned from this, actually? Because my problem with Heather Hallett, about the person who's leading this inquiry, is that often the right questions don't seem to be asked here.
Yeah, well, my biggest fear, of course, is that the person who's the current Prime Minister wanted the lockdown to carry on. If you recall, when the open up started to happen, Keir Starmer, as leader of the opposition, said that, no, this is far too early, far too soon. And there
but I mean, the Conservatives, in fairness, imposed many lockdowns as well. So quite a number of lockdowns, and you know, did nightly press conferences where they scared the pants off people. Now, I'm sure they would argue that that was the right thing to do, but as we're seeing now, that just wasn't necessary.
No. I think that Boris got it wrong. I think the Conservative government had it wrong on COVID. As I say, let's learn the lessons. You said at least there's a bit of hindsight going on. It's even worse if you haven't even got the hindsight. So yeah, the previous Conservative government got it wrong, but the current Prime Minister, and you're saying, will we learn the lessons? Well, if another COVID or something like it happened in 12 months' time and Keir Starmer is still the Prime Minister, then I suspect we won't have learnt anything.
Jane's made a really good point, actually. She says, she's texted me in to say, don't forget Boris only spoke for England. The other nations did their own thing. Mark Drakeford didn't do any better and refused a Wales-only inquiry. Tony says Boris Johnson was a disastrous Prime Minister. We'll keep on that story. If people want to give me a ring about it and give me your points on it, by all means do so. 0344 499 1000. I want to talk about the rape gangs inquiry now and just remind ourselves about what Jess Phillips, the Home Office Minister, said about the inquiry earlier today.
Government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
I'll ask you about that in just a second, Nigel, but there's just been some breaking news, and that is that the White House says that there are no plans for Trump and Putin to meet in the immediate future, according to a White House official. We were told that they were due to meet in Budapest. That was after the meeting that happened, of course, in Alaska, where Trump said that he felt duped by Putin. Maybe I could get a quick reaction from you, Nigel. This is literally just one line that's come out. Sorry, I know we didn't discuss this. It's literally just a breaking news item. No plans for Trump and Putin to meet in the immediate future. Clearly, everybody wants some sort of resolution to the Ukraine question. We were told they were going to meet soon. What do you make of this, Nigel?
Well, it's clearly a retrograde step as far as the possibility of peace is concerned. I don't know where the breakdown has come, whether it's Putin who is withdrawn or whether Trump's withdrawn, or whether they've both had discussions behind the scenes, some of their senior people. And clearly, from everything I've read, Peter, it looks as if there were great expectations from the Alaska meeting that took place, and none of that has come about. And if there's not going to be any glint as far as any prospects for peace in the future, then why bother? You don't want to go through the same parade that happened in Alaska. You want to actually make some real constructive movement towards peace. I mean, he's done incredibly well in the Middle East. Let's be fair. But you know, reading behind the scenes about the conversations that he and Zelensky had, Zelensky doesn't seem all that keen to be moving on any land deals whatsoever. And if Putin isn't prepared to move, then why bother having the meeting in the first place? But I mean, we've got to remember there's a lot of people dying in that region, and everybody needs to get together to discuss what is going to be necessary to make some movements towards peace. And I actually think this is very bad news.
Thank you for that instant reaction there, Nigel. That is the breaking news that a meeting will not take place imminently between Trump and Putin. We'd been led to believe it was going to happen in Budapest. It's now not going to happen. Just back to what Jess Phillips was saying there. Sorry to jump around, but we did have that breaking news. A third victim of sexual abuse now withdrawing from Britain's grooming gang inquiry amid claims the process was descending into chaos. The survivor joins Fiona Goddard and Ellie Ann Reynolds in resigning from the victims liaison panel advising the Home Office. We also know that one of the two candidates shortlisted to run the inquiry has pulled out. Annie Hudson is her name, a social worker, leaving a man called Jim Gamble, who's been on this programme a number of times, a former head of the Child Exploitation and Online Protection Centre, in the running. Clearly this is falling apart. We know the Alexis J report previously that took 7 years. Only 2 of those 20 recommendations has been implemented before this new inquiry even gets started into the rape gangs. Clearly many problems, Nigel.
Yeah, well, let's start from the very beginning, Peter, and say, who are these victims? And we're talking about children. We're talking about some of the most vulnerable people in the United Kingdom who have been victims. It's great that some of the survivors have now come forward to help in this inquiry, but the fact that some of them have now withdrawn, and this is the third one that's withdrawn, why isn't the government listening to what they've got to say? And I believe one of the victims has already said that one of the reasons why she's pulled out is that the inquiry is trying to downplay religion and race. And the victim said, but this is central to what the problem is all about.
Yes.
Now, if this inquiry is going to cover that aspect up, then what is the basis of the inquiry in the first place? Do you know, Peter, there must be tons of people in the Pakistani community who are as outraged as the rest
100%.
of us. They want to see those people who are perpetrating these most appalling acts against children brought to justice.
Oh, you're absolutely right. Although we have had the comments of Saba Kaiser, a survivor of child sexual exploitation herself, saying that claiming most such crimes were committed by Asians was destructive, distracting, irresponsible and not based on evidence. I mean, it is based on evidence, and it's based on what Baroness Casey said in her report, and she publicly expressed that. And I mean, it's very interesting that that has come up as well. We also have allegations that Sir Sadiq Khan, the Mayor of London, who's been accused of covering up evidence of grooming gangs in London after an investigation by The Express. We've heard Chris Philp, the Shadow Home Secretary, say it's shameful the Mayor of London is claiming to have no indication that grooming gangs are operating in London, despite personally responding to reports containing evidence of victims abused by grooming gangs in the city. What do you make of those two aspects of all of this?
Yeah, well, number one, always follow the evidence. Don't start with a conclusion and then pick and choose the evidence that brings up the conclusion that you've already got, right? So shine the torchlight on where the evidence happens to be and then go to where that is. And looking at the map, which I did today earlier on, as to where these grooming gangs are, they're all over. Well, it was just a map of England that I was looking at, so it's all over England. I got no doubt whatsoever that it'll be operating in other parts of the United Kingdom as well. And for the mayor to say that it's not a problem within London, you are joking. If it's a problem in Manchester, if it's a problem in Leeds, if it's a problem, in all the major cities around England, then it's going to be a problem in London as well. And we've seen reports of 13-year-olds, 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds who've come forward from London. And I think that the mayor really does need to start to think. We are talking about children. We're talking about the most vulnerable youngsters who've gone through the most awful torture, and on a regular basis, some of them, then really, quite frankly, to come shooting from the hip and saying that it's not a problem in London is totally irresponsible.
Nigel, as always, thank you. That's Nigel Evans there, former Deputy Speaker of the House of Commons. He was a Conservative MP for the Ribble Valley. Let's just remind ourselves what Boris Johnson said to the inquiry today. This was earlier today at the COVID inquiry in London.
It was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
Alison in Billericay says he was taking advice from experts because it was a once-in-a-century event. He thought they knew what they were talking about. Jill in Cornwall has given me a ring about this, 0344 499 1000. Jill, what do you make of what Boris Johnson has been saying today?
Well, I'm not saying that he was a brilliant Prime Minister. I mean, like the rest of them and the ones we've got now, they're such a load of idiots, all of them. But I remember when COVID was on, I mean, everyone was very concerned about what to do and what was the best thing to do, and children and old people and all the rest of it. And all the information that came on the television, you had specialists, medical specialists, people who knew about infectious diseases and everything, and they were standing and supporting what was being said. And I'm sure that a lot of the decisions made by the government were as a result of what the medical profession had suggested we do. So I mean, I know someone, they're all idiots, that they don't make very good decisions, any of them. But I do think we need to realise and remember that the medical expertise at the time did sort of say, stay in, don't touch things, don't get too close. I mean, there were so many things that we shouldn't do, and I think they have to be responsible also.
But surely, well, I don't disagree with a single word you've said, Jill. My question, I suppose, that goes on from that is, if you're a political leader who can make a decision to, for example, close down schools or implement a lockdown, you've got to be able to take that advice, weigh it up, and not necessarily say, well, that person's a professor or a doctor, they must know what they're talking about. You've got to say this is best or worse for the country. You've got to weigh up all those things, the economic impact, the health impact, the fact, as we were talking about earlier on with Nigel Evans, that he said, look, we know that children were least likely to die of COVID. People who were old, elderly, vulnerable, they were most likely to die of COVID. Therefore, closing the schools was something that wasn't necessarily needed to do. And there were other voices around this. And my worry is that not just then, but in future as well, we will simply listen to the so-called experts who may know their stuff medically, but they may not know their stuff in terms of leading a country. And that's what we need our politicians to do, isn't it, Jill?
Well, yes, and to be perfectly honest, there have been more intelligent, sensible speaking people that have contacted your programme and spoken about situations than we've had from politicians and medical people that have stood up and given so-called advice or telling us what we can and can't do. And I'm sorry, but I sometimes think that there are more clever people outside of the government than we have in.
Well, you don't need to apologise for that at all, Jill. I think a lot of us can agree with what you're saying, so thank you very much. That's Jill in Cornwall there. Donna in Birmingham says, afternoon, Peter. Afternoon, Donna. There should have never been an inquiry into the rape gangs. It should be an investigation. What was reported to who and who did nothing about it? I don't care how far up it goes. People should be going to jail for not protecting our children, says Donna. Jenny says, Putin only wanted to stop Trump giving Ukraine tomahawks. Once they were blocked, Lavrov backed off on the call with Rubio. That's Secretary of State Rubio, their foreign secretary, essentially. Chris in Brighton says, is it me, or does Jess Phillips sound as if she is adopting a sarcastic tone when reading out that rape gang statement, as if she is being instructed to read out something that she does not want to do? She is a shameful woman. Bill in Groombridge in Crowborough says, Boris made well-documented mistakes, but as far as COVID was concerned, he followed the advice of the experts. Give him a break, and you don't pay an expert just to ignore him, says Bill in Groombridge. Well, you can ignore experts if you get advice and you say, actually, no, this isn't good for the country. And that's, you know, what's the point of the Prime Minister? Why don't we just have the experts running the country? Bill, it's a really, really interesting point, but I think I respectfully disagree with you on that. Alex in Devon says, Boris saying that he regrets the lockdown for kids. I just wish I could tell him the utter damage he caused my son, who was 7 at the time. He's never fully recovered, suffers from terrible anxiety and mental health issues. His stupid decision is now costing the council an extra and ADHD treatment. I'll never vote Tory again, said Alex in Devon. Alex, I'm really sorry to hear that that happened. There are so many people who say similar things. I know teachers, I mentioned this earlier, friends who are teachers who say they can see it, people coming through, people who were very young children when it happened and now are maybe in secondary school or getting a bit older. Alex, I wish you and your son all the very, very best, and I understand and I hear your anger in regard to that, as I think so many people share it as well. We'll talk more about this with Isabel Oakeshott, who is Talk's international editor, in just a moment. I want more of your thoughts too. 0344 499 1000.
And as you raise your gun to protect yourself or the people that are in the vicinity, you're worried that you're going to spend 3 to 5 years being investigated and ultimately being taken from your family and thrown in prison. It's a complete joke.
Yeah, that cannot be in your mind when you're thinking about how to protect your safety as the police officer, the safety of your colleagues, and the safety of the public. You cannot have that second thought, because that is going to delay and cloud your judgment. So I think it's quite an important intervention.
He's loaded up the Oval with gold, and he'll do the same in his ballroom.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's just remind ourselves what some people have been saying. Gary says, let's get real. Kids were not locked in their homes for very long once we were allowed out for exercise. I used to come across huge groups of kids on my daily walk who were just sitting there together chatting in the park. They were clearly just ignoring the rules against mixing, and nothing was done about it. Plus, of course, can I remind you, the government had to battle with teachers' unions just to get schools to reopen because they considered the risk to the health of their members to be too great. Well, yes, I do, but they shouldn't have closed them in the first place, Gary, and all of that makes sense. The problem is those kids were sitting around because they didn't have to do any work. They weren't often properly taught, and I mean, there's so many examples I've been told, people ringing in, people telling me over the years of, work that was set, emails that were sent out. Some teachers even refused to teach on Zoom, for example. They said they were never going to do that. So there's quite a lot in this, and I think we need to get into it yet further with Isabel Oakeshott, who's Talks International editor. I'll come to her in a second, but I just want to play this clip from Boris Johnson once again.
It was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
Well, the other thing I'm worried about is that the government running a pandemic exercise at the moment. It's called Pegasus, and there's a Commons statement which I've been reading about this. This is ministers, public health chiefs reflecting on the COVID measures, considering similar interventions as part of an exercise if a similar thing happened. School closures, mandatory masks, stopping public events, stay-at-home orders, all on the table, so the government will be prepared if there's another pandemic. So will lessons actually be learned if this Pegasus process and exercise is going ahead? Well, Isabel Oakeshott joins me now, Talks International editor. Isabel, are you surprised or in any way relieved that Boris Johnson has caught up with the rest of us? If you lock people up, if you say to children you can't have a proper education for a number of months, it's going to have an effect.
Well, first of all, I'd just like to reflect on the ridiculousness of the position that we're in now, that we've got a COVID inquiry going through exhaustive witness testimony. Of course, Boris Johnson is one of the key witnesses to give us some sense of what lessons may be learned. But we are now 5 years on from when this first happened. And how on earth can evidence be given really accurately and energetically when so much time has passed? The world moves very, very quickly, the pace of modern life. 5 years is an eternity in politics, in so many other regards, in technology and so on. And, this is my special subject. I could not feel more passionately about the disaster that were successive lockdowns, and in particular the impact on children. But I'm finding it very hard to listen to these evidence sessions because it just all feels so sort of historic. Why are we doing this now? This inquiry is fundamentally flawed. It should have been given a year-long time frame in which to go through a number of very limited, tightly framed issues and questions, and it should have been wrapped up long ago. Instead, this is going to go on years and years. It is an absolute farce.
I'm just glad they are actually asking questions about the lockdowns, because there's so much evidence I've seen to the inquiry. I expect you've been watching it even more than I have, Isabel, because of your great interest in this issue. But we're in a situation where lockdowns aren't even really questioned. You're still seen as a bit of a crank if you question lockdowns, and that is not right, because the evidence is very, very clearly there. And I think there's at least some glimmer of hope that actually they're questioning this, and that Boris Johnson is questioning this to some degree.
Well, I think I disagree with you that people consider you a crank if you're anti-lockdown now. I mean, maybe it's just that I hang around with too many people who share my political views. Well,
people are coming round to the correct view on this, I think, Isabel. I think there are far more people, and I sort of half agree with you, but I think there are more people coming around to that way of thinking now, because they see the effects of it. They see what happened to the kids, the mental health impact, the huge economic impact, and so on. So I think perhaps people are coming around to it a bit more.
I think, you're talking very interestingly earlier about this pandemic exercise that the government is doing. I think you called it Pegasus.
Pegasus, that's right, yeah.
And I genuinely think that if the government, whatever government, whoever were in charge, attempted to repeat what they did last time and just order everybody indoors, and come up with these ridiculously convoluted rules, which Boris Johnson himself said, were far too elaborate. People will remember with a shudder the rule of 6 and the precise number of centimetres that you were supposed to stay apart from it. It was so complicated. They struggled themselves. Do you remember the tier system?
Yeah, well, people forgot whether it was one metre or 2 metres. And what they're actually doing with this Pegasus exercise is that they're looking at how measures will have an impact on the public, and if the public will accept those harsh measures, but there will still be options if there's another pandemic. So even if this inquiry comes out, well, the planning is going on at the moment with Pegasus, with this exercise, if there is another pandemic. They're not waiting for, I'm not saying we shouldn't be prepared, but they're not waiting until the end of the inquiry. They're not learning the lessons, clearly, of what has happened previously either.
Well, I think I would expect them, and you probably would have a perspective on this as having worked on the inside of government. I think I would expect them to do, periodic exercises. But I think what I was going to go on to say is that there is no way that the population will accept unquestioningly in the way that we all did when the first lockdown was announced, because it was a massive drama. Nothing like this had ever happened before, and in a sort of funny and awful way, it was rather exciting for people. People were like, wow, now I don't have to go to work, and the weather got quite nice. And I think maybe that's what Gary meant, your caller earlier, when he said people were just having a nice time in the park. Let us, none of us, forget what an utter horror it became. The idea that children that lived in dysfunctional families, and unfortunately there are plenty of those, in very tightly packed accommodation, high-rise flats, properties without gardens, for them, school is the escape route from that dysfunction. And make no mistake, a number of children actually died as a result of excessive COVID measures. There were children murdered. We've seen those horrific court cases come through because social workers put their own health ahead of checking up on little ones during this time. I tell you, if I had been a social worker, there is no way on this earth I would not have been pushing down doors to check little ones were okay, because they were at their most vulnerable during this time. And I'm afraid there's a generation of children, even from privileged, better off, affluent families, who are still paying a price for what happened. It caught children at critical stages, whether that was just before their GCSEs, or whether it was that they were changing from primary school to secondary or coming out of nursery. This caused disruption to normality for basically 2 years. And when children are so young, that is a huge part of their life. It might be half of their existence, depending on how old they are. And I think they all suffered in different regards. I'm sure most of them have bounced back, but this was a horror show, and it should never, ever be repeated for a virus that was only seriously dangerous, and we knew this quite early on, to a very, very small number of people.
Isabel, thank you. That's Isabel Oakeshott there, Talks International editor. Alison's been in touch and says, hang on a minute, didn't Starmer put Valence in the Lords and make him a minister? Yes, he did. That was Sir Patrick Valence, now Lord Valence. And he called for longer, stricter lockdown. Anyone smell a rat here? Mags in Rotherham says, talking of Boris, never forget Starmer wanted to take it all further and longer. Also, Margaret, Gary says, this is not to defend Boris over the lockdowns, because it just showed how weak he was as a leader. But Starmer would have locked us down for longer and harder. Those who say they will never vote Tory again would do well to remember that too. It's interesting just to note, actually, that the last pandemic, of course, didn't affect children in terms of severe illness. But if the next one is dangerous to youngsters, parents are going to want schools closed as well. So it's worth kind of reflecting that point. Just on the Pope as well, Margaret has been in touch and says, how can the King even consider praying with the Pope? The King embraces all religions. Jesus never embraced all religions. Well, he embraced the taxpayers, or the tax collectors. He embraced the prostitutes. He embraced many people who had many different thoughts to him, Margaret. But it's a fair point, and I'm very happy to read it out. Let me know what you think. Let's hear a voice note as well now. This is Joe, who's been in touch on the schools closing during the COVID lockdowns.
Yeah, in regards to the schools closing and Boris Johnson, if I recall when it all happened, Nicola Sturgeon actually closed Scottish schools first. And I think that did leave Boris in a bit of a tricky position, because if he had kept it open and it had gone badly wrong, then he would have just been jumped on for that. So I think he was in a catch-22, wasn't happy with a lot of things he'd done, wasn't happy with anything a lot of the government's done at that point. But I do think it was a very tricky time for someone to be in charge of the place.
I agree with you, Joe, but I also think leadership was needed, and bold leadership was needed both at that point. It's also needed now, not just following. We kept being told it was following the science as well. More of your thoughts coming up in just a few minutes here on Talk.
across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Let's go to the phones. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. Mark's in Lincolnshire and has given me a ring about the anti-Semitism issue. Mark, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi there, Peter.
Hi.
Hi there, mate. Yeah, what it is for me, there's a couple of things really. I'm going to ask the question that nobody seems to want to ask. As far as anti-Semitism is concerned, we've seen some very, very clear examples of it over the last few years. We all know this. You know, the pro-Palestinian marches pretty much every week's a classic case of this. But obviously you've had the attack in Manchester, you've had the Maccabi Haifa fans not being allowed into Villa.
Maccabi Tel Aviv, yeah.
We've seen, you know, these are quite clear examples of anti-Semitism. However, it would be wrong of me, as somebody who's spoken a lot about Islamophobia and anti-Islam and all that kind of stuff, anti-Muslim hatred and all this stuff that they like to bang on about, not to mention about anti-Semitism as well, because I do think we seem to be slipping into anti-Semitism becoming some kind of blanket catch-all for any kind of criticism about Israel, the Jewish people, Judaism, the stuff that they do. You know, everything now seems to be, anti-Semitic, it's anti-Semitism. And that kind of worries me, because it seems to be happening, like I said, it seems to have been some of this creeping on us. I don't know what you think about that.
Well, listen, I agree with you. You need to be really careful in our precision with language. For example, here, one thing I do not like about the Jewish faith is kosher food. I believe that the way that animals are killed, and similar to how they're killed with halal slaughter, is barbaric, horrendous, and shouldn't be allowed. I'm really, really straightforward on that point. Now, there will be some Jews who will agree with me, there'll be many who don't. There are many in the Islamic faith who will say that halal slaughter is a religious thing and is really important. I don't think that that should be allowed to exist in the UK. I think both halal and kosher slaughter, which are roughly the same thing, are horrendous, horrible things. I don't think that's anti-Islamic. I don't think that's anti-Jewish. I don't think that's anti-Semitic to say that. I do think that some people would say that that's Islamophobic, anti-Muslim or whatever, or anti-Semitic to say so, but it is my view, and I would say that is due to my views on the welfare of animals, for example, rather than my views on those faiths.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. I mean, I agree with you on both of those points, you know, the kosher and the halal thing. The other side of it that I would come from with things like that is I'm very much the kind of person that does also believe that, as far as I'm concerned, this is a Christian country. It's what built our nation for well over 1,000 years. As far as I'm concerned, other faiths that are here that we've welcomed into our country are essentially guest faiths. They should always observe as a priority what we have as our culture and what we expect. So things like halal and kosher, I have no problem with them adhering to those things if they're part of their faith. However, it should never be a case of, as we see now, where there are schools, there are hospitals that only serve halal.
Yep.
This kind of thing. That is wrong. That is just inherently wrong. We seem to have developed with the growth of multiculturalism. We have this almost suicidal empathy in this country, it feels like, where we're so afraid of being called racist or I don't know, white supremacist or whatever the hell you want to term it, whatever the left throw at us. For the second that you start talking about these kind of issues, where you say things like this, where you say, well, no, that's not okay, actually, because at the end of the day, all of these, as I say, you know, come back to the same thing. When other cultures come into the country and they bring their faiths and, you know, religions, whatever, into the country, as I say, that's one thing. Nobody would really particularly argue with that.
Yeah, but I think I agree with most of what you're saying, Mark. I think the difference between some faiths and radical Islam is that, well, I mean, you could argue about evangelicalism with Christianity. You know, Jews are not shoving their faith down people's throats. They're not saying convert to Judaism immediately. They're not saying this is the only way. They're not saying that our entire culture should change to Judaism. Christianity not really saying that either. I don't think any tenet of Christianity is saying that. I think most Christians are generally witnesses rather than people who want to evangelize. If they want to evangelize, that's fine, but people are also free to say this is not the way, and that should be the way with Islam and radical Islam too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I've got one other thing I want to say on all of this stuff as well.
Go for it.
Because, again, as I say, with this suicidal empathy that I was talking about, that I referenced there, this is something I've definitely seen. I mean, it obviously comes from the left initially. You can probably see it start from, Blair's era, really. And we've got to this point, as I mentioned there, this is a Christian country at the end of the day. Whether, the majority of people aren't particularly practicing Christians, they've still got that value system. That's what built the country. However, one thing, again, this is the same thing. We see all this talk about anti-Semitism, we see all this talk about anti-Muslim hatred, Islamophobia, all this kind of stuff. But the one thing nobody ever speaks about is anti-Christian hate. And there's a hell of a lot of that about.
There certainly is, and there are many jokes. Well, I totally agree with you, and there are plenty. There's someone in my family who is an incredibly dedicated Christian, someone who reads the Bible every single day. The most important thing in this person's life is their Christianity, who gets really offended if, on one occasion many occasions, but one recent occasion in their presence, I said, "Oh, for God's sake," and that person got very, very annoyed when I did that, and had every right to be annoyed and asked me not to say that again in that person's presence. But the fact is that, as we know, it's as if Christianity is fair game, and there can be anything. Satirists, comedians can say whatever they like about it, can talk about, fairy stories and all the rest of it. But if you made that criticism of, for example, Islam, there would be very, very few comedians who would have the bravery to do that.
Well, there's been what I draw reference to as well as examples of this kind of thing. There have been, I'm not saying that obviously this is by no means every Muslim, but there have been Muslims that have broken church windows. There have been Muslims that have knocked over gravestones, that have written graffiti on churches. In fact, there's more attacks on Christian churches than there is any of the others combined. You're literally talking, it's like over 1,000 a year.
There are more of them as well, but yeah, that's a very fair point.
Multiples of those are arson. And one of the most egregious things that really pops in my mind, I was talking about like the anti-Semitism and stuff and what have you. Back in, I think it was this last summer, there's a place in Wales where there's become something that was created just randomly by somebody that became a landmark. And what it was a series of stones, hundreds of stones, that somebody had basically put into the shape of the cross.
Yeah.
Obviously, it's a Christian land, it was great. This became a bit of a landmark. Now, that stood for decades, literally 60 or 70 years, this thing's been there. All of a sudden, this last summer, some Jewish tourists turn up and decide to totally dismantle that, and instead of a cross, it was turned into a Star of David. Now, if this was the other way around, that would clearly be called anti-Semitic. If it was, against...
No, I agree with that, Mark, and we do need to highlight these things more than we do, and that's a perfectly reasonable point. You make a good series of points. I'm just going to move on, Mark, but I really appreciate you giving me a ring. Jason in the Lake District has been in touch and says anyone who questioned the government policy at the time was ignorantly labelled a COVID denier, and the mainstream media were all fanatical about locking down. If we had a stronger leader like Thatcher instead of the clown that's Boris, then logic and common sense would have prevailed after the first lockdown. But sadly, the expert mainstream media and devolved leaders all transpired to leave us in the mess that we are in on so many levels, he says. Grace is in London and has given me a ring, 0344 499 1000. Grace, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Oh, so many things. Firstly, the word evangelical, it comes from evangel, meaning good news. Mm-hmm. And the good news is that Jesus offers each person salvation and forgiveness that we don't deserve, we don't earn it by doing good things. It's offered to each person, and each person...
I was a member of a Good News Club as a child, let me tell you. So what have you rung us to say, Grace?
Well, it's just I'm making the point that you said evangelicals in terms of being fanatical.
They're not fanatical. I'm not saying they're fanatic. I'm simply saying they evangelize and tell people and try to convert people, whereas there are other types of Christians who I would say more fall into the kind of witness side of things, where they just live a Christian life and they don't try to convert other people actively.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, the word gets really very politically used across the pond, and
Yep.
so now some people are hearing that usage of it, but it's quite different from the usage of it here. And I think that you can, and I do, believe that there is one way through Jesus, because that's what he said, and he proved himself by rising. But at the same time, you're not going to force other people to believe in him, because it's each person's decision.
Yeah, totally agree.
There's that distinction. Also, when people say this is a Christian country, I'm not sure about that. It's definitely been influenced by Christianity.
It's been influenced by Judeo-Christian influence. It's been influenced by many things. I'm not sure it's a Christian country anymore. I think it's probably a secular country. There are institutions which are Christian. There are people who call themselves Christian who've rarely, if ever, seen the inside of a church outside of a wedding or Christmas or maybe Easter. But I think I agree with you on that, Grace. I think you rang us about Bob Vylan as well. We're just a bit tight on time, so I just want to give you your say on that.
I mean, ultimately, one of the things that we do kind of believe in this country is that you can have respect for others, whereas we're shifting towards this ideology of territorialism and defeating your enemies.
Yeah.
And that's what I see in the words of people like Bob Vylan and this doctor who've been arrested, whereas Jesus kind of shaped the idea that we have in this country of loving your enemies. Increasingly, people seem to think that the way to be noble and righteous is to hate people who are on the other side and to want victory over them. And they're not, it's really annoying to me as someone who's concerned about problems all around the world, they're not kind of looking at humanitarian concerns. They could be raising the profile of people who are really affected by ideas of white supremacy that have led to the most melanated people being really oppressed. They could be raising awareness of people who are being killed in certain parts of the world through certain things that have been mentioned.
Yeah, Sudan, Nigeria, there are lots of things to talk about, but I'm afraid what it comes down to in the case of Bob Vylan, and I would argue the doctor who's been arrested, is they just hate Israel. Grace, listen, thanks for your comments, Grace from London there. We're going to have a look at the sport next and get more of your comments. Dean Scoggins is standing by. We'll hear about Nottingham Forest's new manager. Stay with us.
mean, what we learn from history is you don't learn from history, Julia. We need to make sure we get the inquiry done quickly. I mean, it's 3 years, this inquiry, hundreds of millions of pounds. It's ludicrous. This isn't actually about, I mean, nobody set out to do anything criminal. Nobody set out to do the wrong thing. People tried to make good decisions, basically were flying blind. It was very difficult at the time, but it's very important we learn the lessons and we don't repeat those mistakes in the future, some of which you've been talking about children not being able to go to school, about people not being able to spend time outside. There's lots of those things were clearly pointless.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Thank you to Lizzie from Birmingham, who says, my husband was in hospital 4 weeks ago and the only meat option, which is halal, which you refuse. It's shocking to think it's now not a dietary request. We just have to put up with it. Lizzie, I totally agree with you, and I don't think that should be the case at all. I hope your husband's feeling better and has made a full recovery, by the way. Debbie says, Julia hit the nail on the head earlier. Children were expected to lose their childhood to save the elderly, who could have just kept themselves safe with some adult assistance. Unfortunately, elderly people are supposed to die first. Why isn't China being held to account? More on that coming up. Loads of people getting in touch about that. But now we're going to have a look at the sport.
Sports news from The Sun.
Dean Scoggins is here from The Sun. He's Deputy Head of Sport. Great to have you in the studio. How are you doing?
Thank you. Yeah, all good, thank you. Busy night ahead.
Yes, Nottingham Forest as well have another new manager, former youth player taking over at the City Ground. Who was confirmed today? Can we expect a change in playing style?
Well, they'll be hoping so, but changing results anyway. So Sean Dyche, yeah, it's a great one for us as we trailed the story right from when Ange Postecoglou was sacked during the week. So seven games without a win, for Ange Postecoglou. So Sean Dyche, who's been out of work, most people remember him from Everton and his more direct style of play, and Burnley, great success with Burnley as well. But yeah, look, they had Nuno Espirito Santo there before the start, before Ange Postecoglou, and I don't think anyone would say that Nuno particularly played a flowing, footballing game, but Sean Dyche will get them back to basics. The defending of set pieces has been a big problem for Nottingham Forest this season, but the great story really is that Dyche is a boyhood Forest fan, played for them as a youth team. He actually broke his leg, which meant he didn't ever play a first team game at Nottingham Forest under Brian Clough, so this is a great opportunity for him. He was there during the Clough era. He's taken Steve Stone and Ian Wone back there, old Forest legends as well, who played under Clough, so the whole thing feels a little bit more sort of Nottingham Forest-like rather than the madness that's been there the last couple of weeks. But who knows? They're collecting managers at the moment, so who knows how long it will last. But best of luck to Sean Dyche.
I'm sure he's
a top man.
He's plenty of confidence anyway. He'll probably be saying something along the lines of, I don't think I'm the best manager out there, but I'm probably in the top one.
Absolutely.
Chelsea received an unusual dose of motivation ahead of their Champions League clash with Ajax, thanks to a visit from a sumo wrestling champion. Do you think this kind of cultural crossover lifts morale in players?
Well, it's amazing, isn't it? Anyone who's wandered around West London over the last few weeks will have seen a sumo wrestler somewhere or other. We've seen them on Lime bikes. We've seen them in the London Eye.
Lime bikes?
Yeah. They were riding around. I mean, they did a great PR job as the Grand Sumo Championship came over to London and the Royal Albert Hall. But yeah,
they gave some of the detail as well. It was great. They talked about having to reinforce the toilets.
Yeah, and there was only 40 of them allowed on the flight because of the weight on the flight and stuff like that. And I think it was 700 kilos of rice over the week that was eaten. So just brilliant stuff all round. And so Chelsea have decided to get in on the act, and so I'm going to try and pronounce his name here. Hoshiruro Tomakatsu was there, 23 stone, all of him, throwing salt at Stamford Bridge as they do to purify the ring. So Chelsea will be hoping it brings them good luck tonight. And Chelsea have had a bit of disciplinary issue themselves, so 4 red cards in the last 4 games, and so they need a win against Ajax tonight in the Champions League, so that's one to watch.
Another big match tonight, Arsenal versus Atletico Madrid. 2 fiery managers in the touchline in Mikel Arteta Arteta and Diego Simeone, can they keep their heads, do you think?
Yeah, it was a great story in the back of the Sun this morning, because we managed to get wind of it last night, that Atletico Madrid, as they came over to train, they trained at the Emirates, and then there was no hot water for them, so it was like dirty old tricks on Hackney Marshes where you don't turn it on for the away team. I'm not sure that was the case. They made an official complaint, Atletico Madrid, to UEFA about not having hot water, but Diego Simeone, their manager, doesn't normally need an invite to get fired up on the touchline, and Mikel Arteta likes to rant and rave a bit himself, so we could get something lively. I said tonight for Chelsea. That's tomorrow night. Tonight we've got Arsenal, Atletico Madrid, Newcastle, Benfica with Jose Mourinho going back there, and Villarreal, Man City. So all three English clubs really needing a win at the Champions League, and you can follow all that on the Sun blog.
Thank you very much indeed. Yes, the Sun blog, and indeed you can see it in the paper tomorrow and at thesun.co.uk. Thank you to Dean Scoggins there, Deputy Head of Sport at the Sun. Thanks also to our texter on the COVID inquiry. He says, I'm not saying I agree or disagree with the lockdowns, but to put things into context, schools were closed for nearly 3 months in the bad winter of 62-63, and we didn't have a problem with kids' education or upbringing. Jane's been in touch as well to say there were many countries locked down. What else were we meant to do? Now we didn't know any better, and maybe we would know better next time. I sat in the garden with my terminally poorly husband in the sun quietly. Isabel is right. No one knew what to do, says Jane. There are lots of opinions on that. We're going to be talking about that more in the next hour between now and 7 o'clock. Brendan O'Neill is with us after the break. He's chief political writer at Spike. We'll also talk to him about the doctor, the pro-Palestinian doctor who has been arrested on suspicion of anti-Semitic messages that she's been putting out on social media. We'll talk to Brendan about that. Also, the rape gang's cover-up by Sadiq Khan that is alleged. He denies that, of course, and the Met Police stopping investigating non-crime hate incidents as well. Plenty to come here on Talk.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, thank you so much to everybody who's been in touch. We're going to get to more of your calls, text messages and voice notes later in this hour, because we're here right until 7 o'clock. There's loads to discuss today. What I think you want to discuss most is Boris Johnson's evidence to the COVID inquiry, where he says that perhaps they went too far with lockdowns. I mean, yes is the answer. We're also talking about the video circulating of the pro-Palestinian doctor Rahmeh Al-Adawan being arrested. We'll talk about that and some of the vile posts that she has uploaded. She's been arrested by the Metropolitan Police. Lots of people getting in touch on all sorts of issues. As I say, we'll get to that. The Metropolitan Police to stop investigating non-crime hate incidents after the Graham Linehan case. He was accused after that post about trans women. Sadiq Khan and the rape gangs as well, a cover-up exposed by the Daily Express. He denies that, of course, and the children paying the huge price about COVID we'll talk about too. Loads to discuss between now and 7. We'll also take a look at what's in the Sun tomorrow. Let me know your thoughts. 0344 499 1000 is the number to call. You can text me 87222 with the word talk in your text. You can tweet me at talkTV. Follow me at Peter Cardwell. Send me a voice note, send me a WhatsApp text message, or give me a ring, all on the main number 0344 499 1000. Loads to discuss, as I say, between now and 7. Stay with me here on Talk. Many people getting in touch on the grooming inquiry. One person saying, afternoon Peter, only one person should head the grooming inquiry. That should be Peter Blexley. He may not have the rank, but most certainly has the experience and the trust of the people. Dave says, in my opinion, the chair of the grooming inquiry needs to be of the standing of Maggie Oliver, someone who knows where to look and will not be put off. Also someone that will be trusted by these girls, which is most important to them, trust. Amy says, how can not only the victims of the rape gangs but also the general public have faith in this inquiry if 3 victims of the potential chairwoman have pulled out, as well as the fact that it seems to be taking forever to make things happen. Jill says, revisiting COVID makes my blood boil. I'd forgotten how angry I was at the lockdown. Boris makes me vomit. I can't bear to watch or listen to his voice. Bob in Surrey says, surely COVID was the great experiment involving China and our government to test how the population would react to being locked away. If the current immigration situation results in race riots, we can see more control coming in. Di in Wales says, don't forget in Wales we had a 3-week longer lockdown than England. It was Keir Starmer that ordered Mark Drakeford to do it. The Conservatives did get it wrong, but wanted them to go further in every respect. They're completely treacherous. And Terry has said, you and Isabel Oakeshott jumping on the Boris bashing bandwagon. Say he didn't take the advice of experts, you would be slating him. What if he let schools open and COVID run rife? You would be slating him. Let's learn, not criticise. Well, we're learning and criticising, and I'm very happy to do that. And there was at the time as well that we were saying, don't do this. It's not as if we've changed our opinion. Jill says, the COVID inquiry wasting more money, pointless. Lockdown crucified the country economically. Jobs lost, children suffered. The biggest scam. COVID fines never cancelled. Boris is a criminal, as are the rest of Westminster. It makes me vomit. And Rafi finally says, lessons learned, Britain's favourite lie, a hollow mantra in a society addicted to denial. I want to talk now a little bit about that with Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer of Spike. But before that, I want to bring you and talk about the news as well about Dr. Rahmeh Al-Adawan, who has been arrested earlier today, a video circulating of her being arrested. This is someone who's put some really vile and horrible things into the public domain. This is the video of her arrest.
You're under arrest for 4 offences: malicious communication times 3, and for inciting racial hatred. On the 21st of July, you gave a speech which amounts to calls for the eradication of Israel and implied support for all those involved in armed resistance against Israel.
So the audio on that obviously not great, but the Metropolitan Police have been looking into this, and they have told us, they've given us a statement saying on the morning, well this morning, Tuesday the 21st of October, officers arrested a 31-year-old woman at an address in South Gloucestershire. The woman was arrested on suspicion of misusing a public communications network, sending malicious communications and stirring up racial hatred. The arrest relates to an ongoing investigation led by the Met Public Order Crime Team into allegations comments made at a protest online in recent months were grossly offensive and anti-Semitic in nature. She remains in custody. Well, let's just take a look at some of the vile posts that this doctor has uploaded.
overall picture is that this is the battle for liberation. The neighbouring Arab countries let Gaza and the resistance down by not joining them after October the 7th. The world has let Gaza and the resistance down by not only failing to stop this immoral, depraved, psychopathic occupier by means of military intervention or sanctions, but by continuing to supply it with weapons, political cover, and extremely biased media coverage.
One of the milder things she said, let's speak to Brendan O'Neill, who's the chief political writer at Spike. The arrest has happened. She remains in custody. What do you think, Brendan?
It's sickening what she said, absolutely sickening. You know, this is a doctor who has said things like, she has talked about Jewish supremacy. She referred to one hospital as a cesspit of Jewish supremacy. She has praised the men who carried out 7th of October, the worst attack on the Jews since the Holocaust. She says that the Holocaust itself is a kind of fabricated tale of victimhood. These are obnoxious and racist comments. But you know what shocks me even more than this one doctor is the fact that anti-Semitism seems to be rife in the NHS. There have been hundreds of complaints since 7th of October aimed at more than 100 doctors who are accused or suspected of saying anti-Semitic things. And what I find really remarkable is that if the Metropolitan Police are found to make a joke about women or to make a joke about homosexuals or whatever it might be, they are instantly called institutionally misogynistic, institutionally homophobic. Why is no one on the left, why are no anti-racists saying that the NHS is institutionally anti-Semitic? Because it seems to have a profound problem with Jew hatred in its ranks.
This doctor said, I don't condemn Hamas, I don't condemn the 7th of October, I don't condemn armed resistance to occupation, I condemn Israel. However, on the 7th of October this year, of course 2 years on since the horrendous attacks of mass murder, rape, burning, hostage taken by Hamas, she tweeted, 7th of October, the day Israel was humiliated, their supremacy shattered at the hands of the children they forced out of their homes, the children who watched foreign Jews execute their loved ones, rape their land and live on their stolen soil. I mean, she's just an awful person. I hope the full force of the law is brought to her. We will see what happens. Also, within the last little while, we have seen Louis Theroux has interviewed Pascal Robinson Foster of Bob Vylan, and this is what the encounter brought to light.
You stand by the chant, and would you chant that on stage now?
Oh yeah, like what if I was to go on Glastonbury again tomorrow? Yeah, I would do it again. I'm not regretful of it. I'm not regretful of it. I do it again tomorrow, twice on Sundays. I'm not regretful of it at all. Like the subsequent backlash that I've faced, it's minimal. It's minimal compared to what people in Palestine are going through, and they're the people that I'm doing it for. They're the people that I'm being vocal for. Then what is there to regret?
That's Pascal Robinson Foster there of Bob Vylan, the person who went during a performance in Glastonbury and said death, death to the IDF. He also lied about that, saying that he was only talking about the institution and not the people. Previously, a few weeks previously, he had said specifically about the soldiers of the IDF. He also repeated the anti-Semitic slur from the river to the sea, Palestine will be free, which is anti-Semitic, despite what Sir Sadiq Khan would have you believe. I mean, even on Somerset Police, we've asked them again on a couple of occasions today. They haven't told us where this investigation is. Really, blatantly, I believe they're just running the clock down on this. I think they're going to say, it's been 6 months, we can't charge, there's nothing to charge, therefore he gets away with it. And he's done horribly anti-Semitic, vile, insightful things. I believe, in my strongly held personal belief, that he has done this on a number of occasions and there is no accountability for him. Brendan.
You know, it's the impunity that all these people have enjoyed that really, really worries me. That goes for doctors in the NHS who got away with it for months, in fact, for 2 years, with saying some of the most obnoxious, racist things one can imagine. And it's the reason that Bob Vylan is still swanning around and still being praised, in fact, by the left, by radicals on the internet, still, you know,
Well, he said as well that within that podcast that there were BBC staff members, he alleges, who said that he had done a wonderful performance and had praised him for his performance.
I would not be surprised at all if that was true. And, you know, the thing is, death to the IDF is an anti-Semitic chant. There is no question about that. Everyone knows that the majority of soldiers in the IDF are Jewish. Everyone knows that if you were to dismantle the IDF, that would lead to the instant destruction of the Jewish state by its anti-Semitic enemies around its borders. Everyone knows it would lead to untold death and expulsion for the Jews of the Middle East. We all know this. We all know that it's an open call for the destruction of the Jewish homeland. And the thing is that death to the IDF is basically the rallying cry of Hamas itself. It's certainly what Hamas thinks when it is taking action in Gaza. Whether it says it or not is a different question. It's probably too busy saying Allahu Akbar. But, you know, people like Bob Vylan and all those privileged fans who were chanting along with him at Glastonbury, they fancy themselves as anti-fascists. They think they are anti-racist. They think they are the good people. And yet they are basically joining in with the chanting and the sloganeering of a neo-fascist militia that carried out the worst attack on Jews since the Holocaust. These people haven't got an anti-racist bone in their body.
Let's talk about the rape gangs inquiry, and we've heard from Jess Phillips, the relevant minister, Home Office minister. Let's hear again what she has been saying in the House of Commons earlier today.
The government remains resolute in delivering Baroness Casey's recommendations following her national audit into group-based child sexual exploitation and abuse. These crimes committed by grooming gangs are among the most horrific imaginable, and her report exposed over a decade of institutional inaction, and we are determined to ensure such failures are never repeated.
Jess Phillips there, the Home Office Minister. Well, the Shadow Home Secretary, Chris Philp, responded.
This scandal arose because young, mainly white girls were systematically gang raped, and this was covered up by those in authority because the perpetrators were mainly of Pakistani origin. So it's all the more shocking that when calls for a national inquiry became public in January, the Prime Minister smeared campaigners as jumping on a far-right bandwagon. Comments like that are a disgrace and are what led to this scandal being covered up in the first place. Months later, just 2 days before facing a vote in Parliament, the government finally agreed to the inquiry. But it's clear the government never wanted this inquiry, they were forced into it. Perhaps that is why, months later, the government has said nothing substantive publicly, and their inquiry is descending into chaos.
Chris Philp there, the Shadow Home Secretary. We've seen these people, these victims who are advising the inquiry. 3 of them have gone. One of the potential chairwomen of it has pulled out as well. 2 of them actually. Brendan, is this all falling apart before it started?
It is falling apart, and we all know why. It's because the establishment just cannot get real about what happened to these white working class girls at the hands of mostly Pakistani Muslim gangs. It just doesn't want to confront this question. For years and years, it ignored this question, and in fact, it's very safe to say now that girls were assaulted and raped because of the silence of the establishment, because the police and social services and politicians looked the other way. These girls were essentially sacrificed at the altar of multiculturalism. Their safety, their dignity were seen as less important than preserving political correctness, preserving the ideology of multiculturalism. And even now, even after promising to get a national inquiry together, still the inquiry feels like it's going to be a stitch-up. It just doesn't want to get to the heart of the truth, which is that there was a racial, religious dynamic to this abuse in particular, and that needs to be explored. And, you know, maybe I'm being ungenerous here, but when I hear Jess Phillips talk about grooming gangs, she always sounds so weary and bored.
You're not the first person who's made that point. I mean, just the point you made a second ago, just in regard to the racial element of this. Louise Casey, Baroness Casey, was absolutely clear in her review of this. That is fundamentally at the centre of this. Surely an inquiry will have to properly look at that.
It has to. Otherwise, there's no point whatsoever. And people always say, what about other forms of child abuse? And what about child abuse within families, including white families? Look, no one doubts that there are all kinds of child abuse. The reason this is specific, the reason this is important to inquire on its own terms, is because it was ignored for so long, is because it was brushed under the carpet. These girls were treated like muck by the establishment. They were basically handed over to these gangs. That's why we need an inquiry into how that happened and how we can make sure it never happens again.
Speaking of inquiries, Boris Johnson has been giving evidence to the COVID inquiry today. He has essentially said that he thinks lockdowns perhaps went too far in regard to children and schools closing. Let's just see a clip of what he has been saying.
was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
What do you think of what the former Prime Minister has been saying, Brendan?
You know, if it now suddenly becomes acceptable to make critical comments about lockdown, I'm going to lose my rag. Because I remember very well when lockdown was happening, in the run-up to it, during it, and after it, it was very difficult to raise these critical points. You would be written off as a granny killer. I myself was subjected to a pretty vicious Twitter hunt, or whatever we call them in those days, because I raised critical points about lockdown. Lots of people were, in fact. There was a real culture of censorship around that issue. It was really hard to have an open, honest, frank discussion about whether this was the right thing to do, especially in relation to children, especially in relation to schools. It was disastrous. The impact that that policy had on kids' development was disastrous. And of course, it impacted on working class kids and poor kids more than any others, because middle class kids tend to live in nicer, bigger houses. Their parents have more time to focus on their educational needs. Working class kids went under the radar. No one gave a damn about them. So I hope we have the honest discussion that we should have been having 5 years ago. It's better late than never, I guess. But politicians like Boris Johnson himself have got to answer for the decisions that they made.
Brendan, thank you. That's Brendan O'Neill, the chief political writer at Spike, joining us. We're going to talk more about those lockdowns in a minute because you want to. I also want to talk to Tom in Rugby now. He's given me a ring, 0344 499 1000, about Dr. Rama Aldewan. Tom, I understand you're a retired doctor yourself.
That's right. And don't get me started on lockdown. That's another matter. Oh, dear. With regard to this doctor, my experience has been that any doctor who has extreme behaviour, extreme views, they tend to lack insight. And a doctor who lacks insight into their own behaviour is potentially a dangerous doctor, particularly when it comes to, their own clinical practice, because how can they be challenged? If they get challenged, they resent it and fire back angrily, and they're potentially incredibly dangerous. Now, I know we have to be careful about this doctor because she's not in charge and we don't want to confront it, but really, it is potentially very dangerous, a doctor who lacks insight.
There are also loads of people getting in touch just today to say they just would not want to be treated by her because of her views. They just wouldn't feel comfortable and wouldn't feel, in their opinion, many people contacting us today saying that they simply would not feel confident that that doctor would be impartial, would be fair, would treat those people with the dignity they needed.
Absolutely, no insight into their behaviour. And I would totally agree with them. I wouldn't want to be treated by her. Absolutely, no question.
Thank you for your call, Tom. I really appreciate this. Tom in Rugby, a retired doctor. Thanks also to Nat, who's listening in Tel Aviv and says, I completely agree with you regarding Islam being shoved down non-Muslims' throats, more so than any other religions. However, in my experience, albeit on a far smaller scale, so is Christianity, says Nat. I have yet to hear about anyone being pressured into converting to Judaism, which is treated as a sort of limited capacity VIP club. And I'm speaking as an agnostic Israeli Jew. That said, I agree with you when it comes to both halal and kosher meat. Luckily, I don't eat much meat, but when I do, I must admit I prefer not to think about it being dead animal, let alone the details of slaughter. Great show as always, says Nat. Well, thank you for that. We're going to talk more about lockdowns in a second. Many people getting in touch about it, including Stuart in Tunbridge Wells, who says the COVID response was the greatest period of sustained cowardice in the whole history of this nation. We will be paying the price for decades. Let me know your thought. Plenty of time in the next 39 minutes to get your voice on the air. 0344 499 1000.
If I was to discuss the overrepresentation of British Pakistani men in grooming gangs, or the continuation of child marriage, or even the problem of FGM within this country, you know, or cousin marriage and the insane pressure that puts on the NHS, these are very real societal problems. But if I make the link that there's some justification there between Islamic scriptures and the real phenomenon that we're seeing, with this bill, I would be deemed Islamophobic or racist, which again is a false equivocation because Islam is not a race.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Lots of people getting in touch on this issue of the COVID lockdowns, what the former Prime Minister has been saying. Sarah in Morden says, lockdown was hell for some people but was a blessed relief for others. I have an autistic daughter who wasn't coping in school at all. It was great for us. In fact, being in school resulted in a mental health crisis for her much later, precisely because she couldn't cope with mainstream schools. Every child who is bullied at school would also have had great relief. I thought the children known to care services were allowed back into school after a while anyway, along with those whose parents were key workers, says Sarah. I'm sure you're right, Sarah, and I'm sorry to hear that your autistic daughter has had such a rough time. I know there are many children who really did not benefit from it whatsoever, as you, in fairness, say in your message. The ones that I really worry about are the people caught in the middle. You know, there are people who are rich and well off enough to say, you know, 3 kids or 3 iPads, and they can all do their work on those or laptops or whatever. What if you don't have a smartphone, or what if you have 1 smartphone and 3 kids and you're in a very restrictive area, small flat, for example? You know, where's the freedom there? In lockdown, I wrote a book during lockdown. I had lots of nice walks. I spent quality time with my parents. I had a good lockdown. Neither of them got COVID. But that was fine for me because we're in a privileged position to be in a nice house in a nice area with enough food, and you know, we were fine financially. That just wasn't the case for so many people as well. So I think when the Prime Minister says what he said today, many people will say, well, hold on, that's with the benefit of hindsight. Let's just remind ourselves what Boris Johnson said at the COVID inquiry today.
It was obvious that there had to be consideration of closing schools. I was very much hoping that we wouldn't have to close schools. I thought it was a nightmare idea.
Boris Johnson there. I speak to Chris McGovern. He's the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education, a retired head teacher, former advisor at the policy unit at Number 10 as well. Chris, what do you make of what Boris Johnson has been saying today?
Well, I'm not impressed, actually, because certainly the Campaign for Real Education, perhaps we were more or less alone in this. We were campaigning from the start to say, look, you mustn't close schools because it will have catastrophic consequences. Eventually, I got a letter from the chairman of the Common Select Committee on Education thanking me personally for leading a campaign to keep the schools open, but it was all too late. And yes, we have the benefit of hindsight, but look, there were other countries around the world, Sweden comes to mind, where they kept the schools open. It was blindingly obvious that if you close the schools, you're going to have a very damaging effect on children, particularly children from a poor background. But also, Peter, by closing the schools, we've totally undermined the credibility of the exam system. Because actually, when we close the schools down, we've got the best results we've ever had in our history.
And we will
Just
still,
shows you what a rubbish it is.
And we will still be in a position in many years to come where you have employers saying, oh, hold on, weren't your results the ones they came up with during COVID? Those people will be tarred for life, often having worked very, very hard for GCSEs and A-levels, and they just handed out the results without any actual examinations.
Yeah, that's absolutely right, and that's going to be like a vintage chart for schools, like a wine. What was a good year, what was a bad year? So we undermine the examination system, and we've caused a lot of damage to a lot of children, which we may never get over. And there are children now absent from school, partly as a consequence of the lockdown. And we got ourselves into a situation where I think many teachers were actually welcoming the lockdown. I argue with uni bosses, for heaven's sake, can't you see the blindingly obvious? You've got to keep the schools open. But I felt like that Greek prophetess Cassandra. Yes, we were always telling the truth, but no one ever believed us. So often the case with the campaign for real education. I think most people, using a bit of common sense, would say, look, they got it right in Sweden and one or two other parts of the world. We can get it right here too. And children, by the way, they're not really affected by COVID, for heaven's sake. There will be some teachers who are vulnerable. They could be given dispensations. Most children weren't affected, so it was a disaster, and Boris Johnson is avoiding that. He was responsible for this. He was the person overseeing it, for heaven's sake. It's caused immense and long-term damage.
Do you think lessons will be learned? We keep hearing that from these inquiries, actually. We have another problem with the rape gangs inquiry at the moment. People are dropping out of it. This one that Heather Hallett has, Baroness Hallett, the COVID inquiry, do you feel if something like this happened again, we would actually be better prepared and actually deal with it in a better and more reasonable way? What do you think?
I don't think that at all, Peter. The only lesson we learn from history is that people don't learn from history.
Yeah.
We'll repeat the mistakes again because it'll be a different situation. But at the end of the day, I think the government have got to consult more widely. They've got to look around the world a little bit more, see how other countries are handling these situations. During that COVID lockdown, we caused long-term damage. Will we learn from it? We never learn. That's the problem. We never learn. We'll repeat mistakes in a different way next time because we have a lot of incompetence in the Department for Education and in government. They need to take responsibility. They've damaged a generation long-term.
Thank you for your thoughts there. That's Chris McGovern there, the chairman for the Campaign for Real Education, a retired head teacher himself. He advised in the policy unit at number 10. Thank you to Darrell in Lincoln. He says, with regard to COVID, they should have either closed the borders immediately and stopped all travel into and out of the country, or did what Sweden did and carried on as normal instead of shutting the stable door after the horse had bolted, which was ridiculous. Lizzie in Telford says, Peter, I'm in two minds about the decisions taken during the pandemic, or the panic as I call it. It was an unknown quantity, and I honestly can't believe that any government could not have made the correct decisions under the circumstances. Conversely, I was gripped by fear by what I would somehow hasten the death of my terminally ill husband who had his cancer treatment cancelled. Where is the right and wrong, says Lizzie. Let's speak to David in Kent, who's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. David, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say on this issue?
Oh, thanks. Hi. I see there's people like Lizzie who are still completely deluded, sadly. I heard ludicrous Johnson on before. I just thought, what a farce this whole thing is, including the COVID inquiry, going on as long as it has too. All we needed to do, and this should have been obvious to everyone, obviously not Lizzie, that previous message.
Well, in fairness, this is someone whose husband was terminally ill at the time, so it's hard to know sometimes exactly, especially when you're told by big scary experts,
I think, as you said, it was difficult to know what to do at the time. I think that was the point of having an issue with. But anyway, all was needed to do was to protect old people who had serious underlying conditions, which basically means in a care home, and everyone else just carries on. We know, one, masks didn't work. Two, closing schools was pointless. The kids were not at risk. We know that test and trace didn't work. Test and trace cost, and I'll remind you, 37 billion quid. That's the equivalent of £40 billion that Rachel was supposed to be trying to find from an alleged black hole. It couldn't work. It was impossible, as anyone with half a brain about virology would tell anyone. And we seem to have unlearned the knowledge and the lessons of the past, sadly.
Have you any confidence in this inquiry?
No, I have none at all. And it's going on far too long. I've heard other inquiries in other countries went on for a few weeks.
Yeah.
It's just still dragging us. Ridiculous and ludicrous. I just don't know where to start. I can add one more thing. One of the most disgraceful things in COVID to me, and it needs saying because these people are not the best paid people in society, and they have not many rights. And that was the sacking of care workers who refused the vaccine.
I totally agree with you. Totally disgraceful.
Morally disgraceful, because we knew at that time already that having had the vaccine, whether you'd had COVID or not, and that was even more stupid to take a vaccine when you already had something, but having the vaccine would not stop you getting it, and it would not stop you passing it on, and we should reverse that. And every single care worker who lost their job should be fully recompensed in full.
Totally agree with you, David. I got all my jobs. In fact, I have a tedious condition that means I'm immunosuppressed, and I get all the boosters. And the point is that, yeah, I've taken them, but people who don't take them, it's up to them. I've, people close to me in my life who have decided not to take the vaccine. That's up to them. That is their decision, and they should not be penalised in any way as a result of that. Thank you, David and Kent. Appreciate that. Dawn in Chelmsford has been in touch as well and says, "Hi, Peter. The level of anti-Semitism in the UK is beyond belief. What is happening to us, our society, has changed for the worse." We'll keep your opinions coming in. We'll get more calls, voice notes, texts and tweets on the air between now and 7 o'clock. I'm also going to speak to John Lucas in a minute. He is the night news editor at The Sun. Lots coming in the paper tomorrow in Prince Andrew. Also, a British drugs gran to be flown home to the UK after spending 12 years on death row in Bali. Loads to discuss with John in just a second. Stay with us.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Well, let's see what is in the inside of The Sun tomorrow with John Lucas, who's the night news editor. Great to have you in the studio, John. Plenty about Prince Andrew getting his marching orders. Tell us about what is going to happen here. We've got the revelation he hasn't paid rent for 20 years.
Yeah, well, it's the story. It just won't go away for Prince Andrew as he is now. He's no longer can style himself as the Duke of York. I think he can technically, but everything else has been taken away from him, and what he's left with is merely this 31-bedroom mansion with 8 cottages in the ground. And
John, just hold your thought there. It's not your fault at all. There's a problem with the microphone. We've got one of our brilliant people behind the glasses coming in right now to change John's microphone. We will get more information about Prince Andrew, of course. The pressure, of course, on him to quit Royal Lodge. He's paid no rent for 20 years, and indeed in the last few days. In fact, I was on air on Friday when they said that the news came through that he was going to not use his Duke of York title. He's not relinquishing it per se, he's rather just not using it. So the question, I suppose, is what should that actually be removed as well? What should the King do? There's been a lot of worry and discussion as well about whether he should leave Royal Lodge. John, we've got another microphone on you. Thank you to our producer Jodie for sorting that out. Continue with your thoughts there.
Yeah, so anyway, I mean, the point is he is merely left now. Everything else is gone. He's merely left with this 31 room mansion, Royal Lodge, which we found out he's been paying this. He's not paid rent since he took it on. So it's in over 20 years. He's been living there as the principal resident, pays this peppercorn rent, which is literally nothing. And a part of the deal is he pays the water bills from time to time.
I wish that was my deal. I'd love to just pay a peppercorn rent, you know, pay the water bill from time to time if I felt like it.
Well, yeah, and the point is, if the rest of us decide to pay the bills from time to time, we have very harsh consequences.
Well, exactly.
And we're out on our backsides looking for somewhere to live.
Exactly.
And that's what a lot of people are saying now. Robert Jenrick was leading these calls to say, look, I mean, the point is he rents this from the Crown Estate, which ultimately there's an implication for the taxpayer here, because if somebody, I don't know what the market value rent would be for this place, but it would be astronomical.
Oh, it would be tens of thousands probably.
Exactly,
yeah.
And if that money's coming back to the taxpayer, you know, that's obvious, that would be preferable. So we've got lots of MPs.
There's some as well saying, John, that actually it shouldn't be a government issue. We had Bridget Phillips, the Education Secretary, saying, I think yesterday morning, that it's not a government matter, whereas it's a matter for the royal family. But actually, the pressure is on the government in this as well, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, they're saying that the National Audit Office needs to get involved. So there hasn't been a review of this arrangement since 2005, and obviously, you know, a whole lot of stuff has happened in that time.
Yeah.
You know, we've had all the revelations about Epstein, which Andrew had said, that's it, there's nothing more to come, I cut off ties with him.
And they kept coming.
They kept coming. We found out
he lied
he
about
didn't tell the truth about it. He was still in touch with Epstein. US Congress has still got all these files that we've had a drip of information that's contained in these emails. Nobody knows what else could come out. Apart from, you know, potentially Andrew, if there is more to come out, he will know what it is.
And as you say, American members of the House of Representatives saying that he should be giving more information, especially about the traffic girls. Virginia Giuffre's book out this week as well. Let's talk about the drugs gran to be flown home to the UK after spending 12 years on death row.
Yeah, well, this is a massive story at the time. If you remember, this is Lindsay Sandiford. So she was arrested flying into Bali back in May 2012 with about £1.5 million worth of cocaine in her suitcase. Now, what she said at the time was her family had been threatened, specifically her son had been threatened with death by a drugs gang if she didn't do it. So she coughed to it all, and she helped actually set up a load of other members of this gang in some undercover stings. Lots of people brought to justice, but Bali has got some of the toughest drug rules in the world. It's unbelievable. I mean, a lot of people say, you know, fair enough, you should have very tough rules on drugs, but this is a lady, British lady, you know, she's in her 70s now. She spent 12 years on death row, where she would, if they actually followed through with this sentence, she would face a firing squad. Now, luckily, they haven't executed anyone since 2016. So she's managed to keep her life. Unfortunately, she's in ailing health, and you know, that's very sad in itself. But on the positive side, she is going to be flown home after all that time. It won't be immediately. It's going to be within the next couple of weeks, we think. But that story, you know, it's been rumbling on for years. The British government have tried to make appeals to get her back, but they are very, very tough on this sort of thing in Indonesia. But Yeah, hopefully in the next couple of weeks we'll see her back.
Speaking of the death penalty, Ruth Ellis, the last woman to be hanged in Britain, her family have launched a bid to clear her name. Tell us about this.
Yeah, a bit of a theme. Ruth Ellis, so yeah, as you say, last woman hanged. This was Ruth. I don't know if you don't know the story. We've got a really good feature written tomorrow by crime editor Mike Sullivan. It's really going to be in depth, and he's been speaking to the granddaughter of Ruth Ellis. So she was a bit of a wild child. She was a nightclub manager. She got into a relationship with this chap, a racing driver, David Blakely, and it was, by all accounts, there's been a TV drama of this. It was an abusive relationship, coercive, controlling, physically abusive. She ended up putting a revolver on him outside a bar and shooting him dead. And what the lawyers are saying, they've got the family have recruited very high-flying lawyers to fight this case, is that in this day and age, if she did face trial at all, she'd be facing a manslaughter charge on diminished responsibility, and she may well not be convicted, and obviously she certainly wouldn't be sentenced to death. And it was controversial at the time. The family saying, so this is Laura Enston, is the granddaughter who's leading this campaign to have Ruth pardoned. She's talking about this, you know, the trauma of this has echoed down through the generations. So there's still a lot of you know, sadness in the family and anger at what happened. So we'll see. But I mean, it will be you know, if you're interested in this sort of stuff, it'll be a good read in the paper tomorrow for sure. One of our top guys has been working
absolutely
on it.
Look forward to that by Mike Sullivan. Lord of the Bins, Britain's dullest man, reckons he's going to clean up with a boring calendar. I got a calendar last year from a friend of mine, Colin, who gave me a Croydon calendar, and it had the not particularly salubrious bits of Croydon. I'm sure there are many lovely bits of Croydon in South London, but there were lots of sort of bins piled up high, derelict bits, rubbish, fly tipping, all that kind of stuff. Now, tell us about Kevin Beresford.
Well, it might be this man who's made it. Kevin Beresford.
It's the same one.
He loves it. He titles himself Britain's dullest man, and he's got this great hobby, if you like this sort of thing, of creating very boring products.
There's some pictures on the screen if you're watching. This is big piles of rubbish, some of them from Birmingham, of course, where there's been a bin strike for over 6 months now. And this is, I mean, would you want this in your Christmas stocking?
I don't know if I would, but this is all based around the Birmingham bin strike, this one. So we've had this long-running dispute, won't go too far into it, but
we've covered it on the show, certainly.
A lot of people in Birmingham are not very happy with this situation, apart from some of the union bosses who seem to want to keep it going, but that's another topic. But yeah, this guy's created fantastic. You're looking forward to planning your year ahead. You can go out and get this calendar. He's got other calendars available.
Right.
The best roadworks, roundabouts, telephone boxes, car parks. And he did the mobility scooters of Benidorm. I don't know if I came on to speak about that one before.
Wow.
And he's branching out into other products, this guy. He does coaster sets. You can get a 6 coaster set of Jack Grealish's calves. If that's something you want,
not really,
dotted around your living room, you can get it. Yeah, good on him.
Jack Grealish's calves. My goodness, presumably his legs rather than small cows.
He doesn't have any yet that we know of. That'd be a great story if he does, though.
From calves to calves, yeah, definitely. Well, there's actually, believe it or not, there is a former, I know you don't do Page 3 anymore in The Sun, but there is a former Page 3 girl who is now a mechanic and resprays cars. And I thought you should interview her for the paper with the headline From Bodywork to Bodywork.
Yeah.
I think that'd be good.
I can certainly float that idea.
I'll give you our details anyway. Yeah. All right then. Thank you very much indeed, John Lucas there, who is the night news editor at The Sun. Thank you to him. And in the next 15 minutes or so, we'll take many more of your calls, text, tweets, and voices. Get your opinions on the air and stay with us here on Talk.
if I was to discuss the overrepresentation of British Pakistani men in grooming gangs, or the continuation of child marriage, or even the problem of FGM within this country, or cousin marriage and the insane pressure that puts on the NHS, these are very real societal problems. But if I make the link that there's some justification there between Islamic scriptures and the real phenomenon that we're seeing, with this bill, I would be deemed Islamophobic or racist, which again is a false equivocation because Islam is not a race.
I mean, what we learn from history is you don't learn from history, Julia. We need to make sure we get the inquiry done quickly. I mean, it's 3 years, this inquiry, hundreds of millions of pounds. It's ludicrous. This isn't actually about, nobody set out to do anything criminal. Nobody set out to do the wrong thing. People tried to make good decisions, basically were flying blind. It was very difficult at the time, but it's very important we learn the lessons and we don't repeat those mistakes in the future, some of which you've been talking about children not being able to go to school, about people not being able to spend time outside.
Across the UK, on DAB+, on your smart speaker, on your smart TV, and on your side. This is Talk.
Susan's been in touch and says, "Hi Peter, enjoying the show." Thanks, Susan. That's great. I really appreciate that. The rubbish calendar, regarding that, perhaps Mr. Pothole could do one of the 12 worst potholes around the country. We would probably need more than 12 months. Thank you, Sue in Essex there. I really appreciate that. Yeah, it's interesting. You can actually make those calendars up quite easily. I have a friend who absolutely dotes on her cat. She's 3 cats. She absolutely loves them. And I generally get her to send me, 4 pictures of each cat and then make up a calendar for her. And that's part of her Christmas present. She's a big fan of her cats, as am I. Although I'm not sure 12 photos of Jack would be necessarily the best calendar. Jill has been in touch with a voice note on the unions during lockdown. Loads of people in touch about lockdown. We'll continue talking about it between now and 7. So let's hear from Jill.
Nobody ever says what the unions did, the damage that they caused by threatening head teachers, that if they opened their schools, they would bring legal action. They encourage parents to write to head teachers and threaten them with legal action if they open their schools. Nobody ever says anything about that. I heard someone on the radio, a union person, encouraging parents to write to threaten headmistresses and headmasters if they kept the schools open.
Jill, you're absolutely right, and I think a lot of the behaviour of the unions was pretty shameful. Just a friendly thing, not admonishing you in any way, Jill, but just people who send in voice notes. Love hearing your voice notes. Not that I ever want you not to listen to me, but please, just when you're recording it, just mute it. We have quite a number of people, including some older people, who have hearing problems, and just to have as clear audio as possible is just really, really important. On COVID, let's speak to Peter in Sussex. He's given me a ring on 0344 499 1000. Peter, you're very welcome to the programme. What would you like to say?
Hi, Peter. Yeah, it's just that I've been listening to you all day, starting with Julia Hart-Brewer with the attacks on Boris because of COVID. I remember very clearly every meeting they had, COVID meeting they had in front of the press every single day.
Yeah, all those broadcasts we were all watching and listening to from that room. Yeah.
The mainstream media were attacking him every single which way but loose. He didn't know what he was doing. I mean, not that he didn't know what he was doing, but he was being attacked every day. If he didn't answer the right question, they were like attack dogs. The normal select committee, like Robert Preston, Kate Burley, and Ruth Rigby.
Kay Burley, Beth Rigby, yeah. I know what you mean, but I mean, they were entitled to ask questions of the government. That's a perfectly reasonable thing to do, is it not?
I agree, but nobody knew what was going on, and he was taking advice from Sage, and some of you do, some of you don't. He didn't know which way to turn because he'd never been in a position before. He'd just become Prime Minister. Now, he got things wrong, don't get me wrong, but I thought Julia Hart-Brewer's attack on him today was way over the top because Starmer was badgering him every single day, longer lockdown.
Yeah, but even he has said he was wrong at times, and what Julia said was right has been proven right.
Yeah, true, but the press were at him from day one when he won the election in 2019.
That's always the way, no matter who is Prime Minister, Peter. They're always at you. It's always hostile.
It seemed like there was an added edge during the COVID meetings, COVID briefings.
Okay.
And it was just like, as soon as he come to the dispatch box, they went for him with stupid questions. But don't get me wrong, in hindsight, he would have done a lot of things differently. Yeah. I just feel today, he got things wrong, and he knows he has, and he'll never be PM again. But because he, to the path he took.
Okay.
I just feel as though whoever was in power at the time.
Yeah.
You look across the world when we were seeing daily totals of deaths from Germany, Spain, Italy, and I'm sure that their governments were questioned on a daily basis. Sweden in hindsight done the right thing, but they were slaughtered for doing what they were doing.
Okay. Peter, listen, thanks for your thoughts there. I really appreciate that. Kevin O'Sullivan is with me now. Kevin's going to be here on the other side of the 7 o'clock news between 7 and 10. Kevin, great to see you. What's coming up in your programme?
Good to see you too, Peter. A very newsy day, as your show has proved. Your eventful show. We're very excited that an old friend of the show, who is one of the rape scandal, the grooming gang scandal victims, Ellie Reynolds. She's going to join us at 8 o'clock.
Very powerful talker. I've heard her speak before.
Yeah, she's going to tell us exactly why she has turned her back on this inquiry, as have two other members of what they call the victims panel, and what they're saying is the same old story.
Yeah.
Ellie in particular wants to say, look, the vast majority of people who were responsible for these vile rapes and torturing and grooming and drugging of these poor vulnerable girls were Muslim men of Pakistani heritage. And she says it's become very clear to her that the inquiry, as stewarded by the government, doesn't want to go there. They want to try to extract that ethnic
which is absolutely true. And also Baroness Casey, who did that short, sharp review, as was characterised by the Prime Minister, said this is the case. You need to look into this properly. But it says so much about it when you have the three of these people, including Ellie, who you'll be talking to at 8 o'clock, and various potential chairs pulling out and saying we want nothing to do with it.
Well, exactly right. And so Ellie also says, as the two other girls who resigned today from the victims panel, just saying it's the same old story. We're being ignored, we're being silenced, and they're trying to widen the remit so that the finger isn't pointed at these Muslim men of Pakistani heritage. And we know why Labour, the government, doesn't want that, because that will alienate and annoy the Islamic community. The government wants the Islamic vote. They don't want this inquiry. And the fact that this government more and more turns away from this, drags its heels. Don't forget, Keir Starmer announced that it would happen 5 months ago in June.
Very little has happened so far. And they've shown...
It's a disgrace.
Well, it is a disgrace, Kevin. And the thing is, they have shown on numerous occasions that when they want to do something quickly, they can do it quickly. Look at the Sheffield Steel. They recalled Parliament on a Saturday to get that legislation through. They did that in 24 hours. If they wanted to set up this inquiry tomorrow, they could set it up tomorrow.
Yeah, well, we learned before Keir Starmer was shamed by the Casey report into calling this national public inquiry, that we already knew that Labour weren't keen on looking into this at all. We'll just do a few local inquiries. Jess Phillips frankly ruined her entire reputation for caring about the victims of child sexual abuse in one fell swoop. She became a government stooge. This government, this is a disgrace. You shouldn't be playing politics with this.
Well, with her statement today, we played it earlier on, she sounded almost bored in terms of what she was saying, and to campaign for such a long time for that job and for those victims. She had a lot of, I don't agree with her politically, but she had a lot of integrity before the election. Becomes a minister, and somehow it's all a bit difficult.
She's spoiled her career. Yes, we'll be doing lots on that. Very excited also, after the 8 o'clock news, we'll be joined by Andrew Lowney, the Andrew author, the author of that book about the downfall of the House of York. And he's got some very interesting theories, because of course Virginia Giuffre's books come out today. We've got a copy of that. We'll go through some of the extraordinary details in that. Andrew, apparently, Prince Andrew,